How are you guys?
Doing good. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Oh, it sounds wonderful.
Okay, yeah, everybody
awesome.
sounds great.
Thank you,
Can you hear
Skype.
me for the... Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. And the great emojis. I've been playing with them for 45 minutes.
Steve, we were playing with those, and I'm like, man, they should have those year-round for people like us.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Almost Birthday Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we're not talking to Steve on his birthday, but this will air on his birthday. So happy birthday, good sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I've always enjoyed having a Halloween birthday.
Well, it's a lot better than having a Christmas or a New Year's, I would imagine, because then you just get the same amount of presents if you're into that sort of thing. And then you're like, well, wait a minute, it's my birthday and Christmas. And people are like, well, you're shit out of luck. Sorry.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I used to think, oh, that'd be perfect. You get twice the amount. But then when I actually met people that had a Christmas birthday, it's like, no, it sucks. I only get the one thing. So
exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So with Steve, all you need to do is give him a carved out pumpkin and a bag of Halloween candy, and you're good to go.
Hey, I'm good to go. Yep.
What if you're too lazy to even carve the pumpkin? Can we just send you a pumpkin or maybe just carve the top and then dump the candy in with the guts and all?
There you go. Okay. In the past, when I was too lazy to carve it, I'd just take a black magic marker and draw the eyes and mouth on it.
That's right. It works just as well. It lasts longer, too. I carved mine 3 days ago, and it's already rotting and just sagging a little. It's a little sad looking.
Last year, we went the upcycling route. My daughter and I, we took about 24 milk jugs, drew faces on them, put water in them, and then dropped glow sticks in them and lined the sidewalk in front of the house. So got a lot of comments on that.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Glow sticks, though. So you can submerge those, and they're good to go?
Oh, yeah. They're sealed.
Interesting. Might have to try that for tomorrow night.
Halloween tips from the Boo Day Boy.
That's right. The Boo Day Boy. Well, hey, it's so good to hear you guys' voice again. I was so happy that we were able to pull this together and do the second annual Allhallowe'en with Steve and Sysco.
I have gone all out. I am surrounded by Oktoberfest, candles, Halloween candy, incense. I'm in a dark room, and I'm ready to rock.
Amazing. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, and I want to talk, of course, about you guys and what you're working on before we kind of dive into the stories that we talked about a long time ago that we were going to cover, but it worked out because now we're going to do a little Halloween special. So Steve Stockton is the author of Strange Things in the Woods, More Strange Things in the Woods, and My Strange World. And now you two, and I think I was a little late to the party, probably had already posted about it, but you two are working on a book together now, right? And that is titled Sysco's Weird World?
No, it is actually called We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife.
Oh, okay. I was close. Yeah, okay.
It's okay. It's okay. Very close. Very close.
Where did I get this? Oh, I think I know where I got that. We were in the message box, and I took a screenshot, and I thought that was actually the name of the book. Never mind me. Okay.
It's okay. It's just, and the subtitle is it's a guided journey through a haunted life, and basically it is that it's the journey of my first experience all the way through. And since Steve has had similar experiences and has learned so much that the more you learn, the more questions you have in this vast, wonderful subject that we're all interested in, I decided that, basically he told me, look, I was always that person who said, I don't want to write a book because you listen to a podcast or you listen to somebody talk on an interview and they're always, it's in the book, it's in the book, it's in the book. And you always had that thing in the back of your head where, okay, did they write it just so I'd buy the book or did this really happen? Right. And I just kind of was on the edge there. And then Steve just touched me with, one sentence and said, when you're gone, the stories go with you and you should put these stories down. And I said, okay, I'll do it if you'll come along the journey with me. So
yeah, it's really Sysco's book. I'm there for support and for color commentary, if you will.
Yeah, it's a different kind of thing. I basically write down the story of an experience. I keep it true to the fact. We don't jam anything down anybody's throat. We tell them, I wanted it to be, this was my experience. This is exactly how it happened. So that kid or that person looking to try to figure out what happened to them could match it up and go, yes, that happened to me, just like that.
That's like something that. We found that even though it's all completely different, there's a lot of similarities in there, and that's, it's more than could be coincidence.
Right. And also that, because that happened to Steve and I both. We're both around the same age. And when we were younger, there wasn't all these podcasts, these lovely discussions with like-minded people. There were a few shows on TV, and there were books. And if you wanted to find out about this, you went in there and you looked for the true ghost stories, and, you went to your library or your school library or wherever you could to try to get this information. And we were just hungry for it, and to try to have to go through all those stories and pick out, okay, is this person telling me the truth? Let me match it up with this one. Let me match it up with that one. It was hard. Now it's a little bit easier for people, but there are still people out there that this is happening to that they're afraid to talk about. There's still that kid who goes to school and saw something in the room that night and can't talk to their parents or friends or whatever. And they look to these podcasts and they look to people like you, Shannon, and people like Steve, and they want to understand what happened, and they want to know that, this also happened to you, Shannon, where you had tried to tell a trusted person in your family, and it was kind of blown off, and that still happens today. So I wanted to put this down in the book and say, okay, this is some things that happened. These kind of things are similar, and I did it in the kind of way, it was like the journey through my life and how I learned a little bit more, and even maybe 20 years after the experience something clicked and I went, wow, that's what it was, because I found out more about it. And maybe it'll help somebody else down the line and the stories won't die with me. So, and Steve comes along behind them, and he writes what he wants to write, and it, it doesn't get changed. And it kind of goes like one of our conversations. Something I say might spark a memory or an old story or a fun anecdote. And it's really interesting. I think it might be different. So we're hoping it does well.
Yeah, did you find that once you sat down that these things just kind of poured out of you? I mean, they were already there, but actually putting it into writing, right?
Yes. And I was nervous. The first one I did was, I remember on your show, we talked about the flying head that came at me. Mm-hmm. And that was my first full memory of something that happened. And it reminded me so much of what had happened to Steve with the little boy he saw that was running and fell into the ground. And he's, and it just makes, it starts off. And I think if you talk to anyone that's interested in this subject, everybody's got one of those. Everybody's got that first experience that went, wow, I want to know what this is about, what happened to me or what's out there, what's going on. So I think that's what everybody really, that's kind of at the core of everybody's interest, along with what's on the other side. And that's where the title of the book comes from, because it's the last great frontier now, isn't it? We can go in the deepest part of the ocean, and we've gone to the moon and probably Mars soon, and we're learning all about what's around us, but nobody really knows what happens there. And even if you get to talk to someone who had a near-death experience, it's just pieces to a puzzle. And we try to put them together, and we don't really even know what the cover to the box is, So we're all kind of going into that like children. We've got that innocence where we'd like to think we know, but we don't really. So we're all kind of going together one at a time,
Now, Steve, have you already heard all these stories that Sysco is sending you to kind of dovetail afterward?
Yeah, and that's the hardest part for me. The stories are so good. It's hard for me to add anything to it. It's like, what she said, but I've had to write and rewrite my part several times on just about every chapter so far, just to, like I said, to feel like that I'm not taking away from her story, because they're all so good and so unique.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, I'm sorry, Sysco, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Sorry. Steve, sometimes I still bring up your sentient ball of leaves story, because it has always stuck out of my mind so much, because I think of what I would do if this ball of leaves actually had looked like it had life and breath and thought. An interaction with me. I've brought that up a number of times in the show, is that ball of leaves. So I'm sure that people, and they've already heard Sysco on last year's All Hallows Eve episode, and we've got episode 2, so we've got more stories. But yeah, I can't wait to get this book and read all of these tales. When do you guys think this might be out?
We'd hope to have it out by now, but due to circumstances beyond our control and basically life happening and other things going on, we're a little bit behind, but soon is the best I can give you right now. As soon as possible.
Yeah. Life has a way of throwing you a curved pumpkin every once in a while, and just and you just got to kind of take it by the reins and go, okay, But we're definitely on it. I'm looking at a chapter right now, and it's one of those where I really like to get it done. We wanted to release it right before Halloween, but, just as soon as we possibly can, and we will for sure let you know. So, and get you a copy too, so you can read it, because, anytime I had the chance when I spent some time in the hospital with a family member, and I was sitting reading them out loud to people, and they were like, really? What happens next? What happens next? And and you never think that people are going to be interested in stories that happen to you. But that goes back again. Steve and I have often talked about that storyteller. We're both Native American descent. So many people are, but we're very locked into that traditional Native American, where we really love the traditional part of all that nature and everything. And being a storyteller is a highly revered part of a tribe, because when you're sitting around that fire and you're telling those stories, not only do they teach lessons in those, but they teach your traditions, and they teach, morals and virtues and all these other things all wrapped up into those stories. And if you look back at some of these stories, they all have that in them too. There's good ones, there's good things that happened. There's absolutely terrifying things that have happened, to both of us, and everything in between.
And like you said, prior to Sequoia inventing the Cherokee alphabet, it was all passed along in oral tradition, and that's indigenous to the South too. The people that aren't of Native American descent, that's just down south, that's people would gather around the stove or the fire or whatever and tell stories. And that was one of the impetus for me to get mine out there. These were stories that I'd heard growing up, and I didn't want them to die with me. I had a sort of an epiphany at my grandmother's funeral when she laying there in her coffin, and I'm thinking of all these things that she had told me. Unless I carried on their tradition and told them to somebody else, it all died right there with her.
Right.
And I didn't want that to happen.
Absolutely. And it's funny too, because my grandmother, it wasn't my grandmother, but it was my great grandmother. She went to great lengths to teach me traditions and to remember who you were. Now, Steve grew up in a family where he could talk at least to his grandmother. And I believe your mom too. Wasn't she a little more open to it, Steve?
To an extent. My grandmother, unfortunately, I was scared of her when I was a kid. She looked like a witch. She called herself a gypsy witch. That was self-styled. And she would always try to get me alone so she could teach me things and tell me things. And said until I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I was scared to death of her. But she would bribe me with a dollar bill or a chocolate bar or something, so. But, that's my biggest regret probably, is that if I hadn't been afraid of her, I probably would have heard a lot more and learned a lot more from her.
Yeah. And with mine, it skipped. I'm sorry, Shannon, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say with mine, it kind of skipped a tradition because we were a little bit more northern. We were up in the northern part. And I don't know if it took longer for people to get over that whole fact of, Native Americans or First Nation people being accepted. My grandmother was scared to death to say she was Native American.
Aww.
And if you go back to her mother, who was my great grandmother, Flora May, she was scared to say because, you lost your store or they could take your property or things would happen to you. So I would go down in the cellar when I lived with my mother, got a divorce, and it was just her and I, and we went and stayed with my grandmother and my grandfather in a little house my granddaddy built. And down in the cellar was so cool because they kept a root cellar was down there where their canned items were, and there was no air conditioning in the house. So on a summer day, right when school first started, right there at fall, it was still hot in the house, and I would run down to get an apple, and there would be my great grandmother, and she'd be in the sewing room sitting at an old Singer sewing machine, and she'd tell me all these things about the clothes she was hemming or the quilt she was making, and I would sit there and she'd let me put my feet on the pedals and she would tell me stories. And she would say, never forget your Lenape and Cherokee. Mm-hmm. And, these are the traditions. She would tell me about herbal teas, and she taught me how to braid her hair, and I would sit and brush her hair, and she'd tell me stories and speak to me in the native language and things like that. And I spent a lot of time with her, and I could speak to her about, what you'd say now is abilities, but of course then it was just, they would say it was, you were born with a veil or the call or whatever, and there would be certain things you were going to see or certain things you could see, see other people couldn't see, and it stuck with me. And I remember going up and going back upstairs to talk to my grandmother about it, and she wouldn't talk about any of that stuff, and my mom was always too busy. And it seemed like we moved out of there real quick, and I didn't get to talk to my great-grandmother very much after that. And about 20 years later, I was at a reunion, and I brought up the old Singer sewing machine, and I found out that the house had been destroyed. I'd not been in the state and was just getting back with all my sisters and brothers and really hadn't seen anybody for years. And I said, what happened to that Singer sewing machine? And we got to talk about the house being taken down to put up a highway, and I thought that was really sad.
Aww.
And yeah, I know. And finally I started talking about great granny and telling me all the things. And my sister was mad. I'm like, why are you so mad? I thought she was jealous because she had chose me to spend that time with. And come to find out, she had got mad. She put a magazine down on the table, kind of put an exclamation point on everything she was about to say. And she said, you never spend that time in the cellar with our grandmother. She said she had fallen down those steps 2 years before you ever moved there. She broke her hip. She was in the hospital, and she died in recovery. So you never spent time with her in the cellar learning anything.
What?
And I said, oh, yes, I did. So sometimes the people who love you will come back from the other side to tell you things that they want you to know.
I just got chills. Oh my goodness me. And let me just say, I'm sitting in my closet right now because I'm not home alone right now. So when I'm not home alone, I have to be up in the closet. I'm sweating and I'm hot, but all of a sudden I just got chills. That was amazing. Oh my gosh.
That was a hug from Grandma Flora May. You're welcome.
It makes you wonder, think back about the times, was that person real that I just sat and talktalked to, or was that a spirit? You may have entertained a spirit unaware.
Okay, but I have a question for both of you, though, because, and I want to also ask about the Lenape that you mentioned and what region that tribe is from. But before I get to that, why did both of you, because you have this in your blood, why are those that have Native American ties or Native American blood, why is there this, even if you're not born with a call, it seems like anyone with Native American ties, they have these extra abilities. Why is that?
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I think it was just the way that they lived and limited resources and things they had to make the best of everything that they had. And it's innate, it's an ability that was developed over time just as a means of survival. That would be my best guess, because it is strange, but you're right. They know things about plants and medicines and how to make things. It's basically how to survive. I mean, you look at, if you've ever looked at some of the arrowheads and things, think about how long it took to nap that flint. Somebody sat for hours during the wintertime and made an arrowhead to hunt with in the spring.
Yeah.
Not just one, but hundreds of them.
So involved, yeah. So you think that connection with the earth and and the universe and everything just kind of flows through you, and then you become a better conduit for things.
Definitely. Sure. And as a people, they knew there was something more than themselves. They knew that there was a spiritual realm that also connected not only the humans but the animals. There's everybody has their totem animal spirit, and certain animals mean certain things in certain situations. So it's basically they took everything around them in nature and in life and were able to weave these fantastic stories and basically the whole mythos, of this is the story of creation and this is what happens here and so on and so forth. It's beautiful.
And it's funny though, isn't it? Because we're so much more quote unquote connected now, but we're more disconnected than ever to what's really around us.
Which is also why when you're sitting around that fire, I mean, how many teenagers or young kids that have phones or whatever are used to that kind of texting world, really box it at first, but 20 minutes sitting around a fire listening to these stories, the phones are put down and they're very intent on what's happening.
Yes.
And that happened every day and every night. And my answer to that question is really twofold, kind of, because I honestly believe that everybody is born with a natural instinct that we are either taught to dispel it or that it's not real or you shouldn't use it. And Native Americans are, if you go back to the traditional Native American, we were taught to watch your surroundings, listen to nature, listen to the wind. That's not just something that sounds pretty. I mean, when you're in the woods and you're listening for that cracked stick or you're listening to the squirrel call, is there danger? Is he seeing something you're not? You're more tuned into it. And, when you see a rabbit, when it gets that flight or fight, fear intuition, it doesn't talk itself out of it. And we do. Mm-hmm. We talk ourselves out of it. We get that feeling, don't go down those stairs. Don't go in that elevator. Don't go around the corner. And we talk ourselves out of it. We go, it's nothing. And we do it. But if we stop, and we stop ourselves from doing it and we listen to it, there's really nothing, unless you see something happen, like a ladder fall or, a bus run a red light or something. You never have that verification that, okay, I'm glad I listened,
right,
to myself. You don't normally get that, but you don't talk yourself out of it. And I really believe that, the more you exercise this, the more open you become to it, just like doing push-ups. You'll do 3 one day, and if you do it every day, you'll be doing, 10 in a couple days. It's the same type of muscle. It's the same type of thing.
So I
just,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
That's okay.
I thought you were all finished. I'm sorry, Sysco. So Lenape, what region are they from? Because I'm not really familiar with that name.
Have you heard of the Delaware Indian?
Yes.
Okay, that's Lenape.
Oh, okay.
Delaware Indian is what the English and the Dutch and everybody else called them because they had the Delaware River. But Lenape, it means the people. And they just called themselves the people. We're the people. Mm. And it was very hard to say. Most Native American languages are very, I don't want to say guttural, but more of a throat. They're very hard to speak. So that's why a lot of the names and things got changed. And they were called the Delaware. So they were up in upstate New York. They were all the way up into Canada and all the way down through Pennsylvania. And, of course, now there's only about 5,000 of them left, and they're out in Oklahoma, which is where the reservation is there. Everybody kind of got moved there. There was a couple of 100 years there where people got scattered, if you remember correctly. So everybody kind of got moved up there. So, yeah, so that's what happened there. We got all the way from the shore all the way to Oklahoma. We kept on moving until there was enough land for everybody else. They got what they wanted, but that's where we wound up. But and that's why I think it was so important for Grandma Flora May to come back and pick someone and tell them, they know spirits and ghosts and energies like that. They have a knowing. Spirit guides, whatever, they know a lot more than we do. They probably knew us before we were born or after, who knows. But they knew that if they picked me, I wasn't going to shut up about it. So, boy, was she right,
we
right?
love you for it. Yes, we do. Oh, gosh. Well,
so that's That's a good one. Now that you would categorize it, we like to categorize things. We have that human quality that likes to put everything in a file cabinet. And if you were going to categorize that one I would just say that's a visitation from a loved one. How she did it, why? I mean, this was over 6 months, Shannon. I mean, this had to be
how
6, 7
often
months.
over 6 months?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's hard to look back and say because I was probably kindergarten, so what, 6, 7, you know. It's hard to say, but it seems like so many memories. Like sometimes I'd go down there and she would be there in the sewing room. I never put it together that she was never upstairs. That's unreal.
Right. I was going to ask. I was like, well, did you get the sense that she was living there? Like, did you see her other places in the kitchen, or it was just down at the Singer sewing machine?
Yeah, and when you're 6 or 7, it's like, you know, you get called up for a lunch, you know,
right.
and
you don't think
go
twice.
say something to my nana and go, hey, well, isn't, you know, Grandma going to have a sandwich?
Wow.
But you'd hear she'd say something like, oh, you know, or Grandma's not hungry right now. It would freak her out. So she never said anything to me, explained, like she never sat down at the table and said, are you talking to Grandma downstairs? There wasn't anything like that. She was always freaked out by it. Usually it got shut up. You know, they changed the subject. So it was easy to, I'm surprised they didn't put me away or something. You know, I mean, how many kids does that happen to though?
Right.
Or called schizophrenic or this or that, you know, because they're seeing things.
Right. And now they're on some god awful medication or, you know, that makes them into a zombie or something. Right. And when actually they were having that experience because maybe they were a kid or plus they were, you know, of Native American descent, whatever that might mean for some people, right? They're just more open to things. That's unreal. What a cool story that is. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I'm like, oh, what a nice little picture you're painting. And then all of a sudden, oh no, she's been dead for 2 years. Like, wow. Okay.
She had died and I checked it out because I had to for myself because I was older then. I was like 22, 23, you know, or maybe older. And I checked it out and she had fallen down those stairs and my other grandmother would never go down those stairs. And now I know why. She was scared to death of it because her mother, that basically killed her mother. It took a while. I mean, she didn't die instantly, but she never came back from the hospital. Gosh. Yeah. So, So it makes sense she'd be hanging out in the cellar.
Was anybody home when she actually took that tumble and you said she was alive for a while because they had to take her to the hospital. Had she laid there for a while?
Apparently she did. I think my grandfather actually found her. He had a workplace down there, and you know they went down. They used the cellar a lot. He had a workplace down there, and then they had all the canned stuff down there. But my grandfather was usually the one who went down there because my grandmother was afraid of the stairs anyway. Maybe she had her own premonitions. Maybe she had her own intuitions and abilities, and like so many people shut them down. You know, a lot of people who shut them down, it's that kind of energy is going to find its way out, you know, through something, either migraines or, you know, that's how you get a lot of your poltergeist experiences and energies building up in a house where things are moving and stuff and the person has no idea it's them, you know. I mean, that's happened. You know, I mean, again, no expert on this, but it, you know, through my travels, I have heard and seen situations that were like that. People try to shut that down. And if you don't find a way to exercise it through, you know, and do something good with that energy, it'll find a path and it's not always good, you know? So I don't know, you know, maybe she did and she was scared of it. So that's why she shut it down. My mom talk every once in a while about it, and she would talk about stuff that happened in the old farmhouse finally after we left, and that's where I saw the flying head, you know, and other things that happened in that house. That was crazy, but everybody had a piece of information, and it took years to put it together and to validate somebody else's sighting. Oh, I saw it too, because the way my father was, and Steve and I were talking about it one night on a conversation, and he had thrown in that my dad was World War II. At that time, they called it shell shock. Now they would call it PTSD. And in order to get through that, he drank a lot, which made him extremely violent. and he was 6'11", and nobody wanted to make that man. So you're in this big farmhouse, and you've got 4 teenage girls and 1 teenage guy. Everybody's in high school. I'm the baby. And when you saw something, you didn't sit around the dining room table that night and talk about it.
Right.
You kept it because he thought it was nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
So Steve had brought up in the convo at one time, with all of the angry stuff going on in that house, were the things my father was fighting that we heard him arguing with or lashing out at, were they really there? Also, did his energy stir up stuff in that house? Was it a reflection of him, or was the entity stirring up my dad, or all of the above? So when you have a situation like that, you really got to back away and look at all of it, because there's so many answers, that could be possible in a situation like that. Right. And that could be going on in someone's house right now. Something they're going through, their energy brought into that house has stirred up something in that house, because it needs something to feed on. We had spoken about that before, soul food. Basically you've got your negative entities that are basically feeding off of your fear and your anger and your fighting. And it's going to stir that up just so we can eat. And that's a creepy way of looking at it, but it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and that's for real. I'm sure Steve has plenty of stories that can, that he can bring out to back stuff like that up, because it happens.
Yeah, there is evil can feed off that. I remember I'd gone to Children's Hospital one time to visit a friend of the family, and you could just feel, I mean, here was all these children suffering. I mean, they had burn victims and car crash victims and congenital defects, everything, the whole gamut there. But I could feel this was like a swirling cloud of whatever it was, and it was feeding off the misery of these children. It was the most evil thing I've ever experienced. And there are things like if you have that volatility, like she was talking about, the violence, the alcohol, whatever he had seen in the horrors of war, you throw all that in together, there are things that will be drawn to that, just like a moth to a flame. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then you have things like we were talking earlier about jumpers. Now, I don't know what other people call them. I have a few medium friends that are much more have much more ability than I could ever hope to have. I have a very small amount, and I've learned to use it to try to help as many people as I can, living and dead. I mean, that's just the way it is, because usually I go in and try to help the person who has passed, because if you help the person that's passed and they're in a home, you're already going to help the person that's in the home, so I that's where I kind of lean in. But you have, like he said, like the moth to the flame. Now, a lot of people, they'll say, okay, we've got this house. Okay, well, did anybody die in the house? Did it, or they start calling I had this one lady, she would leave an empty chair at the table. Oh, that's Martin's chair. Oh. Martin, okay, what's up with that? Well, we have a ghost, and he's Martin, and he died in the house, and yada yada, and that's adorable and cute, and I think that's a wonderful way of looking at it. But ghosts aren't pets, and chances are that's not Martin.
Right? You're like, you hope it's Martin, but no, it's not.
Yeah, you hope it's Martin, But and that can happen in cases as well, and that's why I always loved Hans Holzer, and he was one of my. Oh, gosh.
Yes, that was my first ghost books that I ever got was Hans Holzer. Oh, my gosh, yes.
Did you not love him? And Sybil Leek.
Remember finding that in the library. It was like, holy cow, this is what I've been looking for.
Yep.
Absolutely. That and a bag of Doritos. It was a weekend. He cared more about the spirit and what was going on, and the way he went about, bringing in the medium, and he wouldn't tell them where they were going, and he was very scientific about it, and he had his little recorder, and she would go, he would always use a trans-medium because he wanted to speak to the spirit, and he wanted to find out why the spirit was there, what was up with the spirit, and does the spirit realize that the spirit is dead? And if not, guess what? Let's talk you through it like therapy, because sometimes it's not just once. You've got to work on them a little bit. And and then help that spirit cross. And that always touched my heart, Shannon, because you think about that. If that was me or one of my loved ones, and for some reason they had gotten stuck, oh my gosh, you want to try to reach out and help that person. They say, help your neighbor, or if you walked by and you were walking down the street and there was a hole, and you walked by and you saw a perfect stranger in the hole and they couldn't get out of that hole. Now, what would you do? Would you stand there and just have a conversation with them? Would you say, hey, give me $50 and I'll help you out of the hole? Would you say, knock on the wall 3 times and answer my impertinent questions, and then I'm going to make a recording of it, then I'm going to run off and I'm going to show all my friends, and then maybe I'll come back and see if I can get you some help.
See, that's where we get really hung up nowadays, especially with the TV shows, I think, is that we're looking to prove that there is the person in the hole, and to show it off, like you said, show it off to our friends, but then we walk away and we just leave them in that hole. And I'm not saying that all of these people are qualified or maybe know how to get that person out, and maybe they don't. But at some point, someone should come by and at least attempt to set that person free.
Right.
And it always breaks my heart more when it's a child, right? And they think that it's maybe, and hey, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. You can say, well, maybe it's a demon posing to be a child, and let's just assume it's a child for a moment. And they're stuck and they're looking for their mom or whatever it might be. And your heart's breaking for stuff like that. That's hard. You have to break it down to the human element, and you go, my God, if that was my kid or, my niece or my nephew or my cousin, please, let's get them moved on.
Yep. Yeah. And you've got to get people. I'm a firm believer. I love these groups who go in and they have multiple talents. They've got your techs and they've got your people that they understand and that understand the situation. They understand that the people in the home, if there are people living there, have a lot to do with it. Are they fighting, or, they're about on the edge of a divorce? Is it something trying to break them up? Whatever could be there. They take everything into consideration. They go in with a medium, a couple of different mediums. What are you getting? Well, I've got this. That's not the one that's causing the problem. He's hiding in the closet down in the cellar somewhere, and they're only going to come out because they knew we were coming before we got here. There's so many different levels.
Right.
And there's a lot of paranormal groups that are doing that. And I think we are starting to see a swing now. We went through that whole burst, and everybody was just running out and trying to get, the information. But I think people are really starting to go through a change now. I'm starting to see it where they're starting to realize that, that there are more levels to this. It's not just this person was playing a Ouija board and this happened. That can happen, but there's more to it. What type of person was this? What are they going through? Are they going through an addiction? Are they going through depression? Are they doing this? Because like is going to draw like. And, if you have a really happy home and everybody in the family is doing great and it's a loving kind of situation, they're not going to have the power, to crack through that. Because I'm telling you, light and dark.
I have a question for both of you, though, before I lose this. Do you guys think, because I know you mentioned about the poltergeist, and a lot of times it's a person creating that, and I completely agree. Do you guys think, though, that it's a situation usually where that's the case, or to where there might be a little bit of that person and that energy leaking out and something is attaching onto that to where, is that half and half? It could be either way. There might be an actual entity there. Or do you think most of the time that there could be people causing these sorts of disturbances in their own home?
I think all of that is true.
Yeah, all the above. I mean, you could have somebody that has powers of psychokinesis or telekinesis that they don't really know how to control. But then, like we were talking, the moth to the flame, who's to say that wouldn't draw an entity or something even demonic to that? So it's, I think it's yes and no. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing that any or all of that could apply, just depending on the situation.
Well, like Steve said, moth to the flame. All right. I've got a real quick little story that can explain a little bit. A lot of people have seen The Sixth Sense, and you had the young boy who was seeing spirits that were stuck. Basically, I call those that are stuck and never crossed, I call them ghosts. Spirits, I call that crossed over and come back and do a visitation or come back and give a loved one a message or something along those lines. They've crossed. That's just my definition. Everybody's can be different. But he's seeing basically ghosts that have never crossed. Some of them don't even know they're dead. They're caught in their death state. I had a friend, she was about 22, and she had a friend who had a 3-year-old little boy, and she had been dealing with the same thing that this child in Sixth Sense was dealing with. She really saw it that way. They popped up. They were still in their death state. And that's a horrible thing to see because, if they'd been in a car accident or something, you're seeing them that way. Okay, that was her ability. She didn't know how to shut it off. So she went to help, and I had a real good friend who was very powerful, very loving, wonderful woman who was in the Wicca. And they have some great nature-based stuff to learn to deal with these energies and things. A lot. Wicca really gets a bad rap. They go, oh, she's a witch. Yeah, I've got a lot of good friends that are witches, and I know a lot of bad Christians. So what are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's just the way it is.
It's not too far
It's all
removed
labels.
from a lot of the Native American traditions.
Exactly.
Very
It's very same. So she says, okay, well, why don't you come over? And we're going to, you come over to this house and we're going to show you how to at least shut yours down, how to shut it down and put it to sleep, how to deal with that. So you can go on with your day and then you can teach your son how to do it because that was the real thing. Her son was starting to see them too. And I looked at her and I said, that's why you're here. And she says, you know what happened? I said, of course I know what happened. I said, you had your energy. She had her energy. All your friends had their energy. They came in love. They came in light. But you all have abilities. And here comes this girl with everything that's attached to her and everybody that's trying to get her attention. And it's like a mall opened up with all those lights going off. Now everything is drawn to that light. I said, how far did she make it from the car? Did she make it to the front door? She said, no, the front porch. She couldn't even, because so many were coming at her. Right. And that light just drew all of the ones in that area. Like, look, there's light. It's like, I don't know what they see, but it's been described to me like it's a darkness and this light comes on. And when you do something like, when you gather like that and you don't have protection around you or whatever you want to call it, your light protection, whatever label you want to give it, and you open up a Ouija board and you start going, is there anybody around? Guess what? It's like opening your front door and saying, open house, everybody come on.
Light comes
so you're going to get good. Yep. You're going to get good. You're going to get bad. You're going to get whatever. And if you have people gathered there that have depression or any of these other things, and who doesn't have something? Yeah. If you happen to be an alcoholic or you're into some kind of addiction of whatever kind you want to say, you're going to draw in a negative kind of source. And it may not hit you, and it may not hit you right away, and you might not be aware of it, because I've had a lot of people say, I do that all the time, and nothing's happened. I'm like, yeah, but look at your mother's mess. Yeah. It's going to hit the one that can break. Right. So it's you gotta know that. It's like switching on a light, and a lot of times spirits can be drawn to that just because other spirits are there. They might not even realize the others are there. It's it's like moths to a flame, like moths around a light bulb. Does that moth know the other one's on the other side hitting the same light? Yeah, or does it care? Exactly. It just depends on where they are, how much have they learned, what do they know? There's so many levels to it. And that's why I really loved what you said, Shannon. It's like when I told you I've been looking at this and trying to understand this for well over 45 years. And I mean really going at it. And I'm not an expert and wouldn't even think to even say I was an expert of any certain part of the great paranormal. There's so many different levels in the great paranormal onion. Peel back one, there's another one, and another layer. And there are people who come on and they say, I'm an expert of the paranormal all across the board. And that's hard, to say, because every time you turn over another leaf, there's something else. You got a fragmented soul, or you got somebody like that came to Steve. Steve, have you ever told Shannon about our biker friend?
No, I haven't mentioned that one.
This one's got
That
many
was a
years.
dream visitation that I kept having of a guy who had died in a motorcycle wreck and didn't realize that he was dead. And I mean, I could see the motorcycle. I could see what was left of the body. It was like hidden in some weeds, and it was in such a place that you couldn't see it just passing by. You would have to go down the bank by the river in this, wherever this place was that I was dreaming about, to see that. And it kept happening over and over and over. And finally I asked Sysco, I said, I'm having this reoccurring dream, which is something I usually don't do. What do you think it means? And that and it blew wide open when I brought her into it.
So, I mean, yeah, let's, if you don't mind taking it further from there. So, Sysco, you hear this and you're like, okay, that's not maybe just a dream. Like, that actually might be someone stuck in that part of their reality and they're trying to move on.
Right. Well, it was a little deeper. Yes. But it went a little deeper.
My idea was to go find the motorcycle and find the body.
Right.
Sysco took it farther than that.
Yeah, he thought the guy was trying to tell him. He was getting fragments of it, and it was all telepathic. The man kept revisiting him, and he said it was very much like American Werewolf in London. Like every time he showed up, it was a little more decomposed and a little bit more decayed. And when Steve and I have a dream like that, it's very similar. It's different. It's a very textile dream. You can smell, you can hear, you can feel things. It's a different kind of a feeling. It's not just a dream where you're being chased by something or whatever. It's different. You kind of know right away it's a different kind of dream and you need to pay attention. And he's been having those all his life. And I knew when he told me that, okay, it's a visitation, but he was saying something about his mom. He wanted his mom to know. So Steve right away thought that he had died in a motorcycle wreck. The mother or family didn't know where the body was, and he wanted them to know. So right away, we start Google mapping things. You know, okay, you see a tower, you see this, it's red clay, it's by the river. It's, we're trying to find where it was. And as it went on about 3 or 4 days of us talking about this, I'm getting messages now. I turn on my radio and, I'm getting little clips because they'll do that, they'll send you little messages that keep showing up and it's the same type of thing. And I kept getting, they call me the breeze. Everywhere I went, they were playing this song, the old, Leonard Skinner song.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, all right. They're talking about Georgia. So is it in Georgia? Cause it's Georgia Peaches. They called him the breeze, or what's going on here. So we kind of hit a wall, and I'm saying I feel like we're focusing on the motorcycle too much. And I said, look, I'm going to think back and I'm going to put my intent out there, and I'm going to see where it leads me. And the phone rang. I mean, minutes after I did this, the phone rang, and a friend of mine invited me to someplace that one of my friends, she's a psychic medium, was going to be at. And I said, okay, I'm going. And I sat down in front of her and I said, I'm not here. I called Steve and I got his permission to click into his energy. And I sat in front of her. I said, I'm not here for me. Can you feel that? She said, yes. She says, you're here for a man. She says, no, 2 men. And I said, yes. Wow. And she said, okay. She goes, all right. It's a dream. I said, yes. And she looked at me and she looked down, she looked back up, and she said, well, the first thing is you got to stop looking for the motorcycle. It has nothing to do with it.
Oh my God.
Keep talking to me.
Oh my God.
Keep talking to me. Now, what it turned out to be was this man had done some things. As per usual, a lot of people don't want to cross due to, dogma. Yeah. Or, they've been this or told that. He had done some things he was ashamed of, could not forgive himself. And didn't want I think this is my own thing. I think he knew his mother had passed and he didn't want to face his mother because he thought that she would know these things. So it took 3 people. It took myself, my friend, and Steve all focusing in on this gentleman to try to get him over several times. Steve had to keep talking to him via the dream until we could get him to turn around and look at him and listen, and got him to cross over. So it took a village that day. And it usually does. usually does.
Another question for you guys. Is this like the bingo hall where there's the balls popping and, and they're doing the turning and then a certain number drops down and it happens to be Steve's energy that this guy is tapped into? Like, why Steve?
I think it was his energy. That's what my friend told me. They had I don't know what it was, but I'll tell you, Shannon, this is just my thought. And it may be Steve's. He may disagree with this, but it came after Steve and I were talking. And they will, and I've seen it before, click into, he could connect to Steve's energy, knowing that Steve was going to get a hold of somebody who was going to try to do something about it. And I've seen that multiple times.
Interesting. So because he's being proactive, then they're like, hey, this guy is kind of a gold mine. Let's stick here.
Yeah. And that's basically been the question I've had throughout my life, was why me? Why did I see that? Why? Yeah. And I asked my grandmother about that when she was still alive, and she said, you'll see things that don't make any sense. You'll see things that other people won't see because it's only meant for you. And she basically said it was a way to reinforce your own intuition or your own feelings on things, that sometimes things aren't as they seem, and you just have to accept that because of the way you are.
Yeah. And it could be, Shannon, I mean, I've had an experience with another case, very similar, but the man was scared to death because this child, a young child ghost, kept visiting him. And in this case, it was a child ghost. It wasn't something else pretending to be to get his attention. And after a lot of investigation and several people getting involved with their abilities and trying to sort through this cobweb of stuff that was happening, found out that the reason she connected into this gentleman's energy was because he was away from home. He was working a job that took a very long time. I believe he was away from home for 3-4 months. And he was living in this hotel. And he was missing his family so much, and his children that were about the same age. And he was just a really good father. And he really was pouring out the love and, and missing his own children. And this child ghost was abandoned by her family and basically was staying at that hotel many years before, like that. At least 45 or 50 years before, and had died while she was alone. Her parents were addicts and alcoholics, and they were out during the day and left her alone, and there was a fire in that hotel, and she died there in the closet in another room. But she was drawn to his energy, putting out a father's love, and she just wanted a parent's love, so she was drawn to that. And it could be something that simple, where two energies connect like that. She didn't know him. He didn't know her. He was scared to death when he was constantly seeing her pop up, and she couldn't say anything or wasn't able to explain why she was there. But it was figured out through the help of several different mediums and a psychic that put it all together. And then once they figured it out, they were able to help this ghost move on. Wow. And find other loved ones on the other side. And that helps, that happens an awful lot. And it's not unlike what happened to Steve. And it probably happened again. Sorry, Steve.
I've had some others, not as intense as that one, but had another office building where I worked, and I kept seeing somebody go in the bathroom. I would just see the pant leg and the part of one shoe go in the bathroom and never come back out. And then I started looking into that and found that it had been some sort of banking or securities firm prior to that years ago, and somebody had committed suicide in that bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing that was making you sick, Steve, that wasn't him. It was something else.
Right. It was just something there in that building. I mean, the ground was bad. I think that. Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
Raise it to the ground and salt the earth and put a park in there or something, but it was just. Yeah. Because there were, on average, 1, 2, 3 people being carried out of there in an ambulance every week, and nobody could figure out what it was. But there was another lady went into the same bathroom except the ladies' side and had like a panic attack, couldn't find her way out of the bathroom and was like screaming. Oh, gosh. So somebody went in and brought her out, just all kinds of weird stuff like that. And I actually quit that job, walked away, left everything at my desk. I had some things that I wanted to keep and things that I never went back for under advisement from Sysco and some other people that it was just whatever was there is not something that I wanted to fool with. And
tell folks what you think was there. I mean, and what was the background of the land you were mentioning?
Like I said, had been some sort of banking or securities firm. It was two buildings, two 3-story buildings on a piece of property, and the whole place felt weird. You could feel just like a strange energy in there. I could, maybe not everybody could. Like I said, would see things like that. Like the guy that it's usually late in the evenings, around time to go home, I would see somebody walk into the bathroom, like down the hall. At the end of the hall, there was one door in and out of the bathroom, didn't go anywhere. And one time I was even in the bathroom, somebody came in, went down to the other end of the bathroom, never came back out. I walked down there and there's nobody there. No place for them to go. They didn't go back out. Just little strange things like that. And also I had a habit of getting to work early in the mornings, usually like an hour more. And so I like to get there and get ready. Not one of these that shows up just in time to clock in and get to work. I like to get all my stuff set up and have my coffee and whatnot. And I would hear and sense things early in the mornings when I was the only one in the building too. So I did some research and found out that the prior business that had been there was a huge layoff or something. A lot of people just lost everything and lost their jobs, their careers. And this one person in particular, it was just more than he could handle. And he went into that bathroom and hung himself in the very last stall.
There was just so much there, Shannon. And he was getting
I think
so
it was
sick.
before that even. I think it was before that.
I do too.
Already, I mean, there's one place here where there's like a big commercial store that's supposedly built on cursed Indian land or something. So it makes you wonder, you never know what was here, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
Well, right.
I know a house in Tennessee where they were having all kinds of problems, and eventually they found out through research and whatnot that where the house was built had been a cemetery, like back in the 1800s. It was built on top of a graveyard.
Oh, gosh.
Yep. Those things really do happen.
Literal poltergeist movie situation.
I'll tell you, and he was going to go back to gather his stuff. And there was a lot going on. There was a lot of, him being sick and everything else. And I kept getting all these feelings. I kept calling him like, Steve, I had a dream that Steve was literally circling the drain.
Oh.
And I mean, I just kept getting this. And I said, do not go back. I said, you want to go back? There's a small wood thing you're thinking about going back for. And if you go back for it, it's attached to that and you're not going to make it. And he said, I was just thinking about going back.
You knew there was a small wooden thing. Steve, what was the small wooden thing?
It was a little carved Buddha that my daughter had given me for Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. I mean, it's so weird. We've gotten to the point where sometimes he doesn't want to answer the phone anymore when I call.
Well, what's the point if you already know?
Yeah, she nailed that 100%.
Oh my gosh.
It was about the size of a pea pit.
You two are amazing.
Go back.
This is why.
He did not go back and get it. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad he didn't go back. Yeah, but there was a lot of evil there, and it had been collecting on all the sickness and, like we said, soul food, you know.
Steve, this isn't the first time that a workplace, you've been drawn into some things and seen some strange things. I would be remiss if I didn't mention your Into the Fray episode where you were on for Haunted Las Vegas, where you and Mindy came on and you talked about Bally's Las Vegas, where you spoke about the photography room and the dark room and everything that had gone on in that very haunted building still to this day. So everybody go check that out. But I mean, you guys are just. I will have to say, and I know that a lot of times you go through a lot. You have a lot of these really disturbing dreams, and the whole thing at the office building that sounded really bad. And it probably was hard, Steve, for you to go, you know what? Yeah, I need to let that little wooden Buddha go. And I got chills again for the second time during a call because Yeah, you're like, yeah, there's this little wooden thing. And Steve's like, yeah, she hit it on the head. I'm like, okay, there we go. There's another one.
Yeah, and how could I not listen to that? You know,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Somebody else's intuition. You learn what to listen to and how to listen to it.
Yeah.
If she'd been real general, oh, there's something there that you know that you want, but that I probably would have still listened. But when she narrowed it down to the very thing that I wanted to go back and get, one item, and knew that it was carved out of wood.
God.
It's like, okay, no, I'm not going back.
Yep,
if you'd like, I will reveal right here on this very program for the first time the exact sentence that popped into my head and why I ran into my kitchen and picked up my phone and called him. This is the sentence that came into my head. It's wooden and it has absorbed into the wood and it will ride home with him. And it had to be stopped. It had to be stopped.
And we have that connection sometimes, just things that have absolutely nothing to do with anything. One night we were talking and I happened to mention English muffins, and then her husband comes home with a bag of English muffins and doesn't even know why he got them.
Doesn't know why he got them. He said, did you want these English muffins? And I'm like, apparently
yes,
so.
I did. Steve said so.
I try not to freak him out. I try not to freak him out. I've got one that'll freak you out a little bit there, Shannon.
Let's do it.
I have in the past been a bartender many times. And if you're talking about being at a workplace, okay, we had talked earlier about jumpers. Now, do you know what a jumper is?
I mean, in the literal sense, yes, but probably in the spiritual sense, maybe I'm a little more muddy on that.
Some people call them that. Some people call them, they're very short possessions. Now, you may have heard of this before. When somebody is drinking alcohol or doing any kind of drugs or something like that, that their vibration is lowered. You know, you kind of lower your inhibitions get lowered as long with everything else. Some people get very happy when they drink and everything is fine and good to go. And some people go in and drink because they're depressed or this or that or something else. So you're kind of lowered a little bit. Now, if you're a ghost, someone who has chosen not to cross for whatever reason out of free will or just, you know, it stayed for whatever reason, and you like to drink and you like to do drugs or you like to party or you like to fight, you know, some ghosts enjoy that. Well, you can't do that in your spirit body, in your ghostly body. And some of them learn some little tricks, and one of them is called jumping. So you may be lured, you know, to go to a bar, or you don't have to die there. You could have been, that's just someplace you hung out, or the people, the energy draws you there. And after a while, some of them learn that they can jump in to another body with somebody has the lowered inhibitions or the lowered, protection, whatever you want to call it, and they're very easy targets. So in order to get that taste of beer or to start a fight, because they like that, they will jump in. And a lot of mediums and psychics that I know, they call them jumpers. And it's usually, like I said, somebody who's an easy target. And this one time I was working at a bar, and it was a little bar off a motel, and I got to know my locals, and it was right outside of an army base, and I'm a vet. So I got along with a lot of the guys that came in TDY, which is temporary duty. And I had this one gentleman, and he'd come in, you know, he had been there about a week, and he came in about 4 times, and he was just a really nice, young Southern gentleman. It'd be yes ma'am, you know, and all that. He was just really polite and wonderful, loved his family, missed his kids, much like the gentleman we were talking about earlier. And he was sitting there, and he had a beer, and he was eating a bowl of some of the peanuts I had put out there, and he was eating those, and he's talking to me about his family, and he's actually wondering what they were eating that night for dinner and how much he missed them. And we were just chit-chatting back and forth while I set up the bottles, and I was putting the little pour tops on the bottles, and I'm talking to him, looking in the mirror, you know, how you can do sometimes. You're looking, and he's sitting at the bar. He's telling me this story, and I see this kind of gray mist, just a splotch, kind of right behind him. And I honestly, the first time I saw it, I thought, man, I got to clean that mirror. because I thought it was just a little bit of on the mirror, right? And he's telling me that he's hungry. And I'd said, well, I got some takeout menus here. The kitchen's closed, but I'll be happy to get you pizza or burger or something, no problem. You need to eat. And he was just going on very calm and the way he spoke and everything. And all of a sudden, I look up to the mirror and he just slaps the bar with both hands at the same time. And he raises his head and he just looks at me and his whole face and everything kind of changed a little bit. And he looked at me and he goes, I have a shot of tequila, no salt. And that was just like so wild out of character. And I said, are you sure? I'm kind of thrown off a little bit. I'm like, sure, man, I'll get you a shot. Do you have a preference? And he said gold, but kind of gruff and angry. And I said, okay. And I grabbed the Cuervo and I pour him a shot, and he barely let me get it out on the bar before he grabs it out of my hand, and he shoots it down and he wipes his mouth with his sleeve. And then he stands up and he said, how much pool table? And I told him, and he reached in his pocket and he got change. He went over there and started shooting balls around the pool table, just clearing the table. And I'm watching this guy, and as a bartender, you're very into body language and you kind of know people. And all of a sudden this guy just changed. I'm like, what's going on? And I had to keep stocking the bar, and some other people came in, and I'm watching him, and he comes up and he asks for another, and he just looks at me and says, shot of tequila, no salt. And I gave it to him, and I start thinking, he's acting funny. He's dancing around with the pool stick into all of a sudden he just changed. His whole demeanor changed. And I went back and I grabbed some beers out of to restock out of the back, and I came back in and he's sitting down at the bar with his head down on the bar, with his hands, arms on the bar with his head down. And I came around the side and I looked at him. I said, hey man, are you okay? Can I get you something? And he looks up at me and he just wipes his head and he kind of runs his hand over his top of his crew cut hair. And he says, man, my head is killing me. He said, I'm so sorry. This is not like me. He said, I think I better just finish, and let me go ahead and pay my tab. And I'm looking at him and his voice was back. He was calm. And I said, well, let me get you something to eat. And he says, no, I think I just need to go to my room. I just want to go ahead and pay my tab. And I said, okay. And I go back up to the register and I look back at the mirror again and I see this gray mist hover behind him. It shoots off behind him, circles around the pool table and goes out through where the kitchen doors are. Oh. And I didn't charge him for those tequila shots because I knew he wasn't the one who ordered them.
Wow.
Now you might see that every once in a while. Now, I worked there for 3 years, and another man that came up and he was just drinking cranberry juices and having fun with some office people. I went up to clear the table. And I looked at him and his whole demeanor changed, and he looked at me and said, shot of tequila, no salt. And I went, whoa. Now
Interesting.
What do? You get him a shot of tequila, no salt. What are you going to do?
Right.
Say, you're possessed by it.
You're like, sorry, that's just the local here at the bar. He really likes tequila, no salt.
I'm not going to charge you for it because it's that, and then the next thing you know, he's up there playing pool again. And what do you do? What do you do?
And was that gentleman also clearing the pool table quite quickly? He was good at pool?
It was a lot busier that night, but from what I saw, he was doing pretty good.
Very interesting.
Jumpers.
Yeah.
Jumpers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Echo Bodine. I don't know if you've ever heard any of her stories. She's fantastic.
I have heard her, yes.
Love the way she speaks. She tells a great story about jumpers over at Bobby Mackey's. And she actually went there to help the female ghost that's there. I don't know if you're familiar. You're probably familiar with the story about the bell and all that.
Yeah.
But she went in to help that one, and she went upstairs to take a break, and she noticed there was 3 ghosts there that she was trying to get them to cross. Like, hi, do you need any help? She was, Echo. She's just talking to them. And they said, we're not interested in trust. We like to fight and we like to drink beer. And we're staying right where we are. That's a jumper.
How do you even deal with something like that? Yeah. If it says, no, we're good. We know where we are. We don't need help passing on.
It's free will. Yeah. All you can really do is just, help block hurt it's a bar. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But all the times that anybody's ever drank alcohol and maybe blacked out a little bit, it might not have just been the alcohol.
Interesting. Watch out for the tequila's no salt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's kind of creepy, isn't it? It makes you wonder, like, maybe I shouldn't have beers tonight. Maybe I shouldn't lower my inhibitions. But, it happens. I mean, some people call it a light possession. I mean, like a light possession, that's being like a little pregnant,
Right. Yeah. Touche. Yeah.
But you might not have started that fight either.
But do you guys think it's equally the jumpers? That particular jumper might be quite strong, and then the person they are quote unquote victimizing or possessing for that period of time is quite weak? Or, I mean, what's the dichotomy there? What's the push and pull?
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. It's whatever the jumper is, it knows who pretty much will work the way it wants to work, and that's the type of personality it watches out for. And then, like Sysco said, the alcohol brings the inhibitions down, and then there you go, boom, the person just, all of a sudden somebody else is in control.
Are jumpers always what were previously humans, or are these other entities that were never on the earth?
The ones I'm talking about are.
Okay.
The ones I've
heard of ones that might not be, that could be something other. My brother was an evangelical minister, and one of his things that he did, he'd go out and minister to bikers. He had a biker ministry, and he would often say that a lot of those guys that he met, that he believed that some of the same spirits that rode with like the outlaws of the Old West were now in these bikers, the people that they changed from horses to guys on motorcycles, that there was a continuum there.
Oh,
some
that's
of the
interesting.
things that he experienced.
There you go. But that's basically human on human. Now you've got the other negative entities and attachments and what I call parasites that basically attach themselves to a human being and just work on making their lives miserable. Their job,
some sort of demonic or even elemental.
That's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like the guy that wants to take some tequila shots and shoot some pool for a little bit and use this guy's body. That seems so benign compared to other things that we hear about. Yep,
it does. But, if you think about it, if you ever been talking to somebody at a bar that just, you know what I mean?
Suddenly wasn't there or wasn't the same person.
Yeah. Just a personality change, but immediately you can blame it on the alcohol or you can blame it on something else, but maybe it wasn't.
Wow.
It makes you wonder about the people that have blacked out and murdered people, and then when they come to, they claim to have no memory of it, and you're thinking, but then maybe there's something to that. Maybe it was a murderous spirit of some sort that hopped in there and did its thing.
Yep. And I feel so sorry for those people. And there's been many of them, not even talking about like your Manchurian candidates and stuff like that have been, brainwashed to do such a thing. But there's just gotta be people that are sitting in jail right now that have no clue that they've done that what they've been accused of that they didn't do. And they really didn't. They were taken over.
Well, it makes you wonder because you guys mentioned the whole, someone that's already battered down, and you take a lot of these serial killers, and I'm not standing up for them at all. I'm just saying, a lot of them were abused since they were very young children, and then, a psychologist would say, okay, well, that set them up for ... Well, that might have set them up maybe for other entities to, take advantage of them and use that shell, and they were, the light was on, it was a moth to a flame, and that exacerbated the situation. That's very interesting.
Isn't it, though? Yeah. And I'll tell you one even more, battlefields. There's a gentleman, and I urge you to get him on. His name is Patrick Burke. He is a fantastic interview. He's written several books, and he has since retired from his regular job, and he goes out and only does battlefield rescue. He's a soldier. And he likes to go out there and try to help these soldiers cross over, because you have to understand, if you're dealing with a human spirit, everybody just automatically thinks, okay, well, they know they're dead. They could throw a dish across my kitchen. They must know they're dead. Not necessarily. They may just be trying to get your attention, and that's all that they've learned to do,
That's so damn sad, though.
It is, and that's why,
like an act of frustration or desperation.
Yes.
Or, hey, look at me. Hey, I'm here. Hey, can't you see me?
Yeah.
And then finally, and then something happens, and then they.
And we've spoken of many of those just this evening. The young girl who was trying to get help, because her 3-year-old and herself were seeing, and she didn't know how to communicate. I mean, that night alone, when that young girl went there to my friends to get help, the ones that showed up to her, it was like looking at a meeting at, a consulate or something, or at the White House, where they have a lot of different international people in a room, and everybody's got an interpreter, and this one's speaking French, and then this one converts the French to Chinese, and this one converts the Chinese to this, so this person can understand. Because if everybody has a different ability, just trying to get across what this ghost is seeing, because she could see them, but she didn't know they were talking on a higher frequency and much faster and very irritated and, of course, angry. And the one woman that was trying to help her, she couldn't see or hear them. So she said, okay, well, what did he say? She goes, I don't know. He's saying something about an engagement ring, and he's saying something about, well, the whole thing, it's just like this big group of people trying to understand what this one entity or one ghost is trying to say. And then the ghost is getting more and more irritated, So if you have someone, and that's kind of sort of what I do. I don't want to say ghost whisperer because that's kind of taken, but you want to communicate, I can hear them if they've crossed and they come back and they have a message for a loved one. I can't explain that. It's just how it's always been for me. I can hear them if they've crossed. I cannot hear them. I can see them. But most of the time I can't hear them unless they're good at telepathic, I can't hear them if they haven't crossed and they're here caught in their death state, if that makes sense. So I have to have a way of communicating or have someone with me that can hear them. And then I basically go on the feelings because I can feel what they're feeling, So I can tell if they're depressed or upset or getting agitated. I can feel that. I can feel if they're getting calmer. And I can kind of get little messages in my head about what's going through their head. So if I go on a battlefield or something and I've got 30 of them, can you imagine, what that's kind of like? You have to break it up. Now, the scary, scary part about that, if that's not enough, you have to understand that there are entities that are there feeding off of their pain and feeding off of their agony and eating and just, and they don't want them to cross. They want them to stay there. And Patrick Burke and many others have told about times where they've been on a battlefield and they've had to fight the entities that are trying to hold them there and have them held back so they can get these others crossed.
I didn't think of that aspect of it. That's fascinating. That's a whole nother section of the battlefield scenario I didn't think of.
How horrible is that?
You've
got some place like Gettysburg or Fredericksburg. I just left Fredericksburg 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. I wrote that down to talk about because you were talking about battlefields. So
yeah, it was in the middle of the day, and it's really no different. I mean, of course, it would be more scary at night, and it was a quick trip. But I just walked through Marie's Heights, and if you know anything about, I'm big on the Civil War, and I don't know why. It's very possible I might have fought in one. I believe in reincarnation. Who knows? Maybe I'm drawn to it because I was a soldier. I don't know, but you get drawn to these places, and I've learned that if I'm drawn for that and I'm seeing things that are bringing it up, or I walk by and somebody, I see a book written by it and I wasn't looking for it. They're all little signs and signals, and I said, look, I'm just going to go. Now I have videotape and stuff from that I haven't had a chance to go over yet. And I don't know if I caught any EVPs, but I really don't go for that. I basically just go and go, look, if you're here, I can feel you. Bring yourself forward. Let me talk to you. If you see things have changed around you, or if you feel different, if you notice, when the veil thins, they can, if it thins for us, it thins for them. Would you not agree, Steve?
Oh, so absolutely. It's thin on both sides. I mean,
right.
That's just the nature of it. It couldn't be thin on one side and not on the other.
I mean, yeah, if you just think about it. So if we're seeing snippets of them, they're seeing snippets of us. Very much like the movie The Others. They, the main characters there turned out to be the ghosts, and they were, everybody, each one thought the other one was the ghost. Right. And on a battlefield, it's a lot like that too. And they're just, some of them, you could say residual. It's just energy repeating itself. Maybe, I don't know. And then you've got the intelligent ones that if you stand in one spot and you say, if you can hear me, read my intent and know that I am telling you the truth. I am not here to waste your energy. I am here to help you, and if you would listen to me, let me talk you through this, and a lot of times you put out that energy and that intent, they'll walk forward. And that's what happened to me in Gettysburg. And that's what happened here in Fredericksburg as well, because they are there and they're very confused. And if you think back, you put that human heart and that feeling back into it, and you think this could very well, if you're sure that you're not dealing with an entity posing, if you're not dealing with something else, trying to trick you, and you can tell that this is a human being, you have to understand, what was their time like? What was their dogma? What was their religion? What were they taught? It was very black and white back then. And if you were bad, you went one place. And if you were good, you went another. And some of the good, nobody could pass the good that they had to go through then, I mean, it's so much as if you were rude to your mother, you were going to hell, I mean, you have to think about what was their time like, and, these were people that were fighting hand to hand and saw things that young people should never have to see or live through. And if they were in town, they called their own wife Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They didn't even use their first names. They were that rigid in their teachings.
Right.
So when you go to a battlefield and you've got your tape recorder or your EMF meter or whatever it is you have, and you go up and you're starting to ask rude and pertinent questions to these people and they're people, and you're asking them, what was the war like? What's it feel like to be shot? And you're asking them all these questions, and they're answering you and using up their energy, and then you walk away. And they're doing tours 10 times a day, every day, 7 days a week. When you think about that, it's absolutely, it's mind-boggling what's happening.
Well, something that you brought up that I find really interesting is you said that, so you have the men that actually passed away on the battlefield, but you also have these other entities that are coming in and feeding off them, kind of being stuck there, and that's an interesting idea to me, and also very sad, of course. But wouldn't those entities that are attaching to those that are already passed, are they just misguided, or is there not someone that hangs around long enough that's living right now that they can feed off of? Why would they be interested in those that have already passed?
Because of the amount of pain and agony and suffering.
Yes, it's like an opportunistic spirit. If you look at, say, the Battle of Chickamauga, that was one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. There's a monster there that they see, that even the park rangers call it Old Green Eyes, that they've seen on Snodgrass Hill. Well, there comes to find out that entity or whatever it was that they see in there, it was seen while the battle was still going on, moving about the corpses and things.
Oh, God.
And it's still there. So
yes,
who knows?
And are these supposed to be demons, or what are these? Are they? Are these earthbound spirits of some sort? What are they?
Well,
I think
sometimes it's hard to pigeonhole. I mean, I think it depends on your religiosity and your upbringing and how you see it. I mean, one person, it might be an elemental, another person, it's demonic. I think it's kind of what you interpret it as, but it's otherworldly.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something that'll send a chill up your spine. You still in the closet?
You better give me some chill, because I could use it right now. I've already had a few, though. I'm not going to lie. I could use another.
Here's one. I had a friend who is a trans medium. And for anybody who doesn't know what that means, that's a medium that usually goes into a trance and the spirit is allowed to come into and speak through them. Now,
like in the movie
EVP,
Ghost.
Yes. And just like Hans Holzer used via Sybil Leek and others.
Yes.
You know, she would go into a trance and he could actually speak to the spirit through her. Well, this gentleman was doing this and it was all videotaped and it was also recorded via recorder. And they're talking to the spirit. And meanwhile, he's speaking to this one soldier who died on this battlefield, and it happened to be Gettysburg. And it was on the wheat field, I believe, which was a horrible, they were all horrible battles, but they all have their stories. And all of a sudden his voice changes and he's speaking this language and they weren't sure what it was. And at the time they couldn't pinpoint what language he was speaking. They just thought that they were getting somebody speaking in tongues or something like that, whatever you want to call it. They go back and they listen to it, and they were trying to get the soldiers. They had 3 of them at the time that were willing to listen and wanted to cross, but were a little apprehensive of going into the light or whatever you want to say because of what they've been taught, their dogma, with their beliefs. And, you know, what we did here was horrible. I've killed people. I can't cross over there because I'm going to, you know, burn in hell, basically, is what they were saying. And they were trying to tell him, no, you know, it's not what you've been taught. Go into the light and get your peace. You know, they were trying to do that. All of a sudden, this voice comes in and starts speaking. Well, they go back over it and they find out it was not speaking in tongue, it was speaking in German. Oh. And it was a Nazi soldier that had died there, that had chosen not to cross, that he was very bad in life. He had done a lot of horrible things and liked it. He chose to be that way. He was a human entity that had decided to stay and feed off the negativity of the soldiers that were there going through, repeating their agony and their wounds and their being shot and everything that they were going through. And he was feeding off of that. And he said, 9, you cannot take them. They are mine. They are my, basically they were his food.
Oh.
And they couldn't figure out why a Nazi soldier would be on this battlefield. Now you got to figure out, you know, time and placement and everything else. Was he just drawn here? Well, come to find out, there used to be a POW camp there in Gettysburg. That they held some German soldiers there before this. Can you imagine? God. Can you imagine?
All that hate,
all that hate.
Oh my gosh.
So some are human. And here's another one, also in Gettysburg, and I will not say her name, but there is an orphanage there. And when I went to Gettysburg, I didn't have the energy to deal with it at the time. I'm gathering some people to try to help. There is an orphanage there, and these children went through living hell when they were alive, and they went through that orphanage and they were treated horribly. And you can read on it. It's well documented. And the person that treated them like that in life is treating them like that in death and holding them, not letting them cross. So there is another one that's human that, what happens, over time, I've heard many people and theories that say, you know, after time that you know, that spirit can change and you can turn negative. And, you know, there's lots of theories on it. I really don't have one. I've just seen it. Yeah. I've seen human beings, dead and alive, do horrible things to other human beings. So it, you know, and it does happen.
I have a question. You were saying that you know, at the time you didn't have the energy and you need to gather a team. So when you go back, are you going to address the person that was, you know, torturing these children, or are you going to address the children and which one are you trying to release, or is it both?
Well, you got to hold that one back to get the other ones out. And that's not the first time I've had that happen either, because there was another time I went to help. And again, I say I have a little bit of ability when it comes to this, but I can speak to them, and I have an intent I put out there, and I think anybody can do that. I'm also a multi-level empath. A lot of people are, as Steve is as well. and you can feel what's happening, and you're talking to them, and all of a sudden their fear builds up, and you could start feeling basically like their heartbeat starts going like a hamster, and you're like, what are you afraid of? And they say, you have to hurry, he's coming.
Oh, God.
Who's coming, honey? Who's coming? So if you have someone else there that can hold that one back while this one crosses, then you deal with that one.
Okay. That's where the team comes in. I gotcha.
That's where the team comes in.
Oh,
that's where the team comes
in. My gosh.
Yeah. So it gets a little crazy, you know. I mean, you think about this, and I mean, you know, I when I came back from Gettysburg, I had stuff come here and follow me. You know, and you have to go through a lot of that. I know a lot of people go through that. You
had to address these things, and say, hey, this is, belong here. You need to go.
Yep. And I'll tell you right now, watch your animals, because animals are extremely sensitive to those things. Dogs, cats. Don't dispel those things. If you have something in your house and your dog is barking at stuff that's not there, there very well may be something there.
Probably something there, yeah. That's a whole probably month of episodes that I need to do for the show, right? Is the old animal sensitivity subject.
I'll tell you, Shannon, it was harsh, because when I came back, there was a lot going on, and I was paying attention, and even with the little bit that I know about this, and being aware, it still wound up killing one of my cats.
Oh my God. What?
And, we took him to the vet, and it was nothing. They couldn't find anything wrong, and we took him to the vet again, and I kept saying, there's something here. I gotta find it. I gotta find it. I gotta find it. And it was under the bed the whole time. Yep. And I kept saying to my husband, the cats used to go under the bed all the time. They were his cats, and they were just kind of a little neurotic anyway. They just had their little things. All of a sudden, they weren't going under the bed anymore. And I'm like, there's something under the bed.
This is under you and your husband's bed in the main bedroom. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, and I will be sorry for this the rest of my life, that I clicked in, I did a little bit, and I thought it was enough, but it wasn't enough. I had to bring out the howitzers. I had to bring it all in. I mean, I had to bring the holy water. I had to bring everything.
Wow.
And once I did that, the cat started getting better, but it wasn't in time to save him.
I'm so sorry.
And as soon as I did all that, the other cat went back under the bed.
No kidding. Well, okay. What was it? Was it a human being spirit?
I think it was. I think it was. I couldn't tell you 100%. It took an awful lot to get it out of here.
Jeez.
But and it fought hard, and it took little Simon, and it was just not in time to save. And like I said, we took him to the vet 6 times. They couldn't find a thing wrong with him, and it's just, these things happen, and they happen. They're happening now. They're happening to people listening to this. They're happening to other people that don't realize this is going on. When you unintentionally, bring this stuff in. And the only thing I can tell people is there's nothing truer that I can say on this show than what I'm about to say now. Light and darkness. Light will always, one tiny pinpoint of light will always expel the darkness. Never stop believing that. Never stop believing that. Love will always conquer hate. So just believe that and wrap yourself in it, because I've seen it work 1,000 times. 1,000 times. Love each other. Just keep that going, because if you can do that, you can dispel it. You can dispel anything. So that's just an experience that I had here not very long ago. And like I said, who knows? I wish I could give you an answer. I wish I could say that it was somebody that was mad that I crossed about 7 or 8 of them over that night.
Right.
At Gettysburg. I don't know.
I have a question for you. When you're having to do your badass Sysco business, is your husband just like, okay, I'm going to let you do your thing, my lovely wife, or does he take part in this? What does he think of all this?
Dude, he doesn't want nothing to do with it. Okay. But he supports me 100%. This is my sweet husband. This is my sweet husband. he'll come in and the white sage and Allhallowe'en wood and stuff like that burning in the house, and he'll look at me. He came, just like a couple months ago, he comes out and he's got these mirrored closet doors that slide. And I guess he was putting his suit away or something like that. He comes out, instant look on his face, and he said, there's a cross. It feels like there's some kind of oil on my closet door. Is there anything I should know about? And I looked at him and said, not anymore, baby. And he said, okay.
Oh my God.
He said, awesome. Okay. And he went back to his shower.
Oh.
And he doesn't want to know.
That's very cool. He's very supportive though. That's cool. I like that. That's cool.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's my proofreader for my stories. I'll give him a chapter. They read this and he goes, did this really happen? I'm like, yeah, it really happened.
And you're like, hell yeah, baby.
Good stuff. He goes, is this happening right now? Is there anything?
Is there anything I need to know? Please tell me.
Exactly. And I'll say, nope, it's all gone. Everything's cool. And he'll say, oh, yeah, he knows. And, since we've got together, he's had the crash course, but he'll see me when I come back from something. And I'll like, honey, we crossed another one over, and he'll cry. He gets tears. He hears, he thinks he said, that's just awesome. Sounds
like a really good guy.
He is. Yeah,
very supportive, which is, it helps those of us that are into this, but maybe they're not quite so much, or maybe they don't really get why we're so into it, but they're still supportive. So that's very cool.
Yeah. It is cool.
Well, hey, I want to get into a couple of these stories from your book, and I know which two that you definitely want to cover, and I would like to get it, if you guys are okay with it, exactly how you have kind of modeled the outline for the book. So it's Sysco and then Steve kind of, dovetailing with his ideas. So if we could do that, I would love that. So if you guys don't mind, if we could go to Ride from an Angel.
Okay. Well, this one is going to be, now Steve's heard this story, but I haven't sent him this chapter yet.
Oh, is it okay to do this then? Or?
So sure.
Oh, okay.
I would say that this would be
Go ahead,
live
you tell the story and I'll give you my impressions live. So.
Okay, awesome. Oh, cool.
So it'd be a live version of how we do this. Which is kind of like we do our. Okay. That was crazy. All right. And that's me saying that. So I had gotten
Watch out. I love it.
I had gotten a call one night. My sons were, like I said, I was pretty much, I've said before, a single mom kind of. Okay. So I've got my sons in their home and I get a call from a loved one who was in trouble, and he was battling an addiction. And he said, basically, if I have to get in the truck and come and drive home, I'm not going to make it. And I said, okay. I said, I'll come and get you. And in that course, you got to imagine how you are at that time. You're frantic. You've got your kids. And I had a neighbor lady next door, an elderly lady who loved to watch my kids. And I got them some popcorn and, a quilt and a movie. And I said, look, I'll be back in half an hour. I have to go pick up somebody. Would you mind watching them? And made sure that they were safe. And I got in my car and I barreled for this one place. And it was going to be about 3-mile drive. Now, I had grabbed my purse and I had grabbed my keys, but I didn't have any money and stuff. My wallet wasn't in my purse. And as I was driving, I was probably 2 miles from where I needed to be. And it was late at night. And it was in a section that you just don't want to break down in. It was kind of the rough part of town. And a tough little redhead, but it was late at night and it was just one of those nights, And all of a sudden, my car starts to sputter. And I looked down, I said, no, please. No. And I look, and I had not put gas in the car, and I didn't have my money or my wallet, and I wasn't going much further. And I managed to pull the car over to the side, and it happened to be on a parkway that had exits off of it. So you normally would have a lot of traffic passing you. And being the fact that it was like 11:30 at night, there wasn't very much. There was some. So I managed to get the car off the side of the road and pull it off onto an exit and throw the flashers on. And I said, well, This is where I am now. You know, what choice do you have? I didn't have a cell phone. That was back when you had beepers, and I did not have a cell phone. So I got out and I started walking in the direction I was supposed to go in. And I really felt this ominous thing over me, even more so of not being able to get to this person that I needed to get to. I knew if I got to where I was going, there were work trucks there. So I would be able to get into one of the work trucks and drive home. I just had to walk there. Now, like I said, it was a bad part of town. And even though I was on the parkway, it was not really good. And I'm walking and I still feel this pressure of something bad is going to happen. And as I was walking, I remember looking down at my feet. I was wearing moccasins. I remember looking at my feet and I'm taking steps and I said, okay. I said, okay, God, it's me and I'm in trouble. I really feel like if you don't send me somebody or you don't do something to help me through this, something really bad's going to happen. And I don't know if it's going to happen to me or if it, and I'm saying it just like I'm saying it to you. I said, I don't know if it's going to happen to me or if it's going to happen to him or what's going to happen, but I feel it and I need help. And I really, really need it now. And I'm still looking at my feet as I'm walking. I took 3 more steps. 3 more steps. And a car pulls over in front of me. It was a small silver car, much like the shape of a Camaro. I really couldn't tell you what kind it was because I'm a motorhead and if it's, before 1975, I don't know what it is. They all look the same to me. It was a small silver car and it just stopped. And I stopped walking and I looked at it. And I've learned to go with my intuition as best as I can. And I'll put my hand out and put my hands out in front of me and try to feel the energy coming off of something. And I started walking towards it and I'm like, geez, this isn't good. I mean, do I get in? Do I not get in? What do you do? You're a single female on a parkway at 11:30 at night. What do you do? Right? Everything in your body is saying run the other way. And I'm walking towards the car. And I still feel like it's okay. And I look and I don't remember seeing the license plate. I do remember seeing that, like I said, it was a light gray or silver car. And I walk around the passenger side. I look in and it's a single male, short hair. And you do all those things that I don't know how to say it, like women tell each other, tell themselves, like he looks okay. I remember thinking, Bundy didn't look too bad. You know what I mean? I remember thinking that to myself, like, what are you doing? Stop doing what you're doing. But my inner voice was saying, it's okay. And that's what confused me. And that's what kept me going on because I've learned to listen to that inner voice. Everything else would usually be screaming inside of you. And I looked in the car and he reached over and it was a roll down. So he reached over and he rolled down a little bit and he goes, you shouldn't be walking out here at this time of night. And I said, yes, I get it. He goes, is that your car back there? I said, yes, it is. And he said, what'd you do, run out of gas? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, how far are you going? And I told him. And he said, well, you don't need to be walking out here. He said, I'll give you a ride. And I put my hands on the car door just to feel the energy that was coming off of it. And I promise you I did this. And it felt okay. I felt nothing but peace. And that was so weird because normally it would just be everything is on, your heart's beating like a hamster. All of your, everything is just fired up. And I just got such peace when I put my hands on that car door and I couldn't explain it. And then I did something that absolutely horrified everything in my brain. I opened the door and I looked and I could see that, he had a stick shift. And there was bucket seats and it was empty in between the 2 seats because I'm looking for anything that's sticking out, like weapon, can I take this guy? I mean, all these things are running through your brain. And I really need this ride, And he looks at me and he's staring forward, like he's got his hands on the steering wheel and he's looking forward and he turns and looks at me and it's almost as if to read my mind. He said, I won't do anything to hurt you. Well, of course, they all said. And I said, but when he said it, I felt like he wouldn't. And again, I was trying to live on my survivor stuff. And I said, I could probably take this guy. I hadn't been out of the Army very long, and I'm kind of tough. And as long as I kept my instincts going, I could probably get through this. I needed the rock, and I got in. And like I said, I closed the door, and I looked between them. Now, I'm as far up against that door as you could possibly be, and not be on the other side of it. And I've got my hand on the door handle, and he starts taking off, and he knew where I needed to go, and he knew it was just a couple exits up and a turnaround down a dark street, which is great. And I'm just sitting there like watching his hands, and I'm watching everything. I'm watching the way he moves in case he made a fast move or something. And he looks at me, and he kind of smiles. He had the bluest, most sparkly eyes I've ever seen in anybody. They were just so calming and nice, And I feel like a total idiot because anybody told me this story, I say, you're an absolute fool for getting in this car. And I'm still up against the door. And he looks at me and he says, you can be calm. I'm not going to hurt you. If you were my sister or my wife, I would want somebody to pick you up. Did you not see the municipal plates on the back of the car? I just got off duty. And I said, no, you know what? I didn't see the plates. They were kind of, thinking back, they were kind of blurry, I didn't say that out loud. I said it to myself. And I said, no, I didn't see the plates. And he goes, I thought you would have saw the plates. And no, it was, municipal plates. I'm a cop. And he looks down, and this is where it gets funky. He looks down where the shifter is, and I'd been watching his hand every time he moved to shift that car into gear. There was nothing between those bucket seats and my hand up. Now I see a gun in a holster.
Oh my God.
Tucked into his seat, and his wallet with the badge showing. And I'm not even going to tell you what the number was because you wouldn't believe me if I told you. With the badge showing. And he says, I'm a cop. And he looks down and he, points with his eyes down for me to look. And I look. Now I'm really up against the door. Like that wasn't there before. It wasn't there before. It wasn't there. I've been watching his hand. I looked in there to see if there was anything, trying to be, before I got in the car. And the whole time I was in the car, I'm looking, and all of a sudden it's there. Are you kidding me? So I'm like, no, I didn't know what to say. I was just dumbfounded and flabbergasted. So he goes up, and now we're starting to get close to the exit that we got to pull off. And he goes, this exit right here, is this the road? I'm like, yes. He's like, yeah, just turn and get me out of here, Takes the turn, and he comes around, and sure enough, we have to stop underneath the overpass. It's at a little red light, and I can almost see the business I have to get to. I see the light on because it's a dark street, and they were still there. It's a little construction hub, if you want to call it. And I'm like, I should just get out of this car now and start running. And he looks at me and he says to me that, like I said, almost like he could read my mind. He said, I'm going to get you there safe, but I have to tell you this first. And I said, oh God, here it comes. And I'm just shocked, just sitting there looking at him. And he turns to me, because like I said, we're sitting at a red light, and he looks at me, he catches my eye, and he looks right into my eye, and he says, you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. Can you remember that? And I said, yes, I can. And he said, remember that. And the light turned green. He pulls up, and I said, this house here, I said, there's the truck. They're sitting inside. You could see them sitting at the table through there's a screen door and a big window, like an office front. And I could see them sitting at the table. I said, this is it. And he pulls down the little dark road, past a couple businesses that were closed. So there's no lights on. And he pulls into where the construction hub is, and it's all gravel. So you can hear this car rolling on the gravel. And I mean, I've got the door open, and I got my foot out before it even stops, and I shut the door real quick, and I leaned in and I said, man, thanks so much. I appreciate the ride. I wish I could give you money for gas. So I don't have any. He goes, no money is necessary. He said, just remember what I said. And I said, I certainly will. And I ran around the front of the car, and I run up the little steps, to get to the screen door. And the person I was picking up and his boss was standing right there at the door. And kind of opened the door for me to come in. They heard me pull in, whatever. And I come running up the steps. And he looks at me, and I can't remember what I said at first. I was kind of like burst into like, oh, I'm glad I got here in time. I'm glad you're still here, whatever. And he said, well, how'd you get here? Where's your car? And I turned around and I looked. I said, that guy right there. And he says, what guy? And I said, that car right. And I turned around, and there's no car. And there's no sound of a car pulling out on the gravel. There are no taillights going down the dark road in either direction. I just got a ride from an angel.
Holy shit. Okay, Steve, it's all you. Go ahead. Oh my gosh.
I love stories like this. Just when I was a kid, we didn't go to church. I wasn't raised anything as a heathen, even though I had several preachers in my family thereabout. Later on, my brother became a preacher and was involved in the church, later in life and things. But I love stories like this. I've had experiences with what I believe to be angelic beings. I've met a lot of people that have had, similar experiences where out of nowhere, I remember back from the 70s when the CB craze was popular, a guy had ran out of gas during a snowstorm and was stranded. He was calling for help on his CB radio, and a guy in a red truck stops, picks him up, takes him somewhere and drops him off. And the whole ride there, he's thinking, something's just not right. And he starts noticing, and this was during the 70s when the CB radio was a big rig that fit, like under the dashboard or something. It wasn't anything tiny. This truck had no CB radio in it. The guy drops him off, and he looks around or something, turns around and tells the guy thanks again or something. The truck is gone and there's not even any tracks. So you hear things like this, and I love it. I could sit and read a whole book of angel stories. Yeah. And it's one of those things that's part of pop culture. I think that it would probably surprise you that once you start talking to people, it's almost like a ghost story, that you'll find a point where people are like, well, I don't really believe in that, but let me tell you about what happened to me one time.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder, so, a badger knot, like why add in the no gun and then all of a sudden there's a gun? Now, badger knot, right? Like that still would freak you out because
I think if she had seen the gun, she wouldn't have gotten in, and then something terrible could have happened. The next person might have been, like I said, Ted Bundy or whoever. So
right. Yep. Good and point. I think honestly, I think maybe it was there at that time to calm me, because what off-duty police officer, I mean, I have several in the family. What off-duty police officer takes his badge? Now, some people take their wallet out of their back pocket so they can sit comfortably, especially,
and then, but have it open to the back.
But have it open like that.
On top of the gun.
So you can see it, it was there to calm me. Mm-hmm. Because he wanted, it was
almost like a trick. No, now you don't see it. Now you see it. It's like, wait, where'd that come from?
Well, yeah. And you made a point of saying, like, I was watching his hands the entire time. He had a stick shift, so the eyes were drawn there. It's always moving. That's
bucket
fascinating.
Seats, emptiness in between. Bucket seats, emptiness in between. Wow. And he gave me, and right after that, it was not long before, I realized I can't help this person. This person doesn't want to be helped.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's the way it was. And I listened.
Yeah. And he said, remember what I said, right?
How can you not?
Yeah. Remember what I said. Holy smokes.
Yep. So if you need help, ask for it. Just believe. Just believe. Just take all the BS and the stuffing out of it and just believe, man. Because there's light and there's dark. If there's dark, and we can certainly on this program admit that there's dark things out there. Mm-hmm. Why can't there be light? Why can't there be light? Why do we have to put, a lot of things that we put so many labels and things like that. If we just talk about dark and light, love in the absence of all these things, it must be hate, So there's got to be a yin and a yang there, So absolutely. And I've seen both, and I'd much rather hang out with the light. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, also, if you go into the Native American traditions and things, you have the trickster. You have Loki. Sometimes he plays a trick on you. Sometimes he helps you out. It's just, it's kind of a cross-cultural thing there. There's similar stories, even in groups of people that don't even believe in that sort of thing. You'll hear those same types of stories.
Yep. And these things might be a higher being. We call them angels, because when you say angel, you believe right away, right away what we're talking about, because we love labels, but there might be a lot of things in that. It could be it could be a spirit guide. It could be a loved one that's passed that's got that energy to help you right at that moment. It could be an interdimensional being that comes over and, it could be so many things, and if we get hung up so much on the label part of it, we have to put it in that category. In fact, I think it's somewhere in our forward or something. I say that about, I'm going to have this file cabinet, but if you're honest with yourself and you take all your files out of your file cabinet and you lay your residual down, and you've got your file that says residual haunting, and then you've got your demon, and then you've got your dark entity, and you've got this. If you live honest with yourself, you'll see a lot of those things cross over into each other.
Absolutely.
And that's just the way it is. And I think that's one of the things that hangs us up, because, like I said, like the one young lady who was trying to get help that night, one of the entities one of the ghosts that came to her that they couldn't help that night, if he showed up in your house, you would say right away, today's lingo, we would say, oh, he's a demon, because he's erratic and he's throwing things, and he's angry and he's ugly because his face is disfigured and he's mad. And you have to understand that when a human being passes and they choose not to cross, they're the same human being with all the same attributes that they had when they were a human being, even more so now because they're agitated. They don't know what's going on, or maybe they do know what's going on and they're just trying, this is what they know how to do. There was a group called the Ghostbuster Gals that called them ass souls. If you're an asshole in life, you're an ass soul if you die.
Yeah.
And also you wonder if maybe part of that is not a projection. Like when you get these people that go in and try to provoke spirits and things. I mean, that would just piss me off if I was a spirit. And,
absolutely.
Somebody comes in and starts
off in life.
calling me names and stuff.
Yeah.
I would do anything nasty that I was capable of doing to them.
Right. And then it has a lot to do with you as well. Because look at Gettysburg, Steve. Now, when I went to the field in Gettysburg, I went with the intent to help those soldiers. As a soldier, as a mother, if the sons that my sons at that time would have been the age of these soldiers. I mean, these were anywhere from 16 to 25 was the average age of these soldiers. I mean, it's hard to even wrap your head around, And I went in there on the very same field at the very same spot that the night before a woman had been slapped across the face and a man had been punched in the stomach by the same, in the same spot, because they went in the group and they were provoking and they were asking impertinent questions and they went in there being rude or whatever it was they did, and they didn't know any better. It was just they got caught up in what they were doing and they wanted a response. They got punched in the stomach and slapped in the face, and I got hugged. So is it them or is it us? Or is it both? Or is it both? And honestly, that's the truth. If you realize that when you're dealing with human beings, if we are dealing with a human being and we can break that down, and we figure, okay, it is a little girl or it is, an older lady that's just confused, and it's not something pretending to be, which is why, like I said, sometimes you need a team. It takes a village, like it did with Steve's, issue and many others that I've been involved with. You need to understand that it just might not be Marvin who died of smallpox in 1923 up in that bedroom. It just may not be. And calling him Marvin over and over again and leaving him an empty chair, is not doing him or you any good, because Marvin passed. Marvin's crossed over. This is not Marvin. This is somebody that's making you and your husband fight, or, is attached to your son who has whatever, an issue, and it's just working on you.
But I think it's fascinating that you, going back to what we were talking about before, the fact that Marvin, maybe he's not crossed over, and he might be he has good intentions, he's a good spirit, he's just there, he's just lost, he can't find his way, but there's this other darker entity that's attached to Marvin, and now they're both kind of, playing with you, or, maybe playing's not the right word, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Steve, what do you call that? Don't they call that a soul gatherer? What do they call it in the older?
Yeah, it's like an elemental type being that's what it does. It wanders around and tries to gather souls for whatever nefarious reason that's typical of the most of the darker arts and things like that. That there are a lot of the black magicians that delved into that type of black magic that would create an entity that would gather souls, which they would be able to use for whatever reason.
And that's just what we're talking about humans, that humans pass and they get stuck. And then this one person I don't know why Soul Reaper is sticking in my head, but maybe that's something from Native tradition. I don't know. I really don't, but anyway, you get the point. They're just basically breaking down the human soul till they absorb it, and they're collecting, soul collector kind of thing. And that's just, I'm like, how many other things we have to worry about now? I mean, how many levels? Right? And that's just human. Now you bring in the extra dimensional, and me personally, I do believe that there's multi-dimensions. I've met many friends who are shamans. Again, we're dealing with native and traditional and, Hindu and Buddhist.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're bringing in that as well. Now you've got like the black-eyed kids coming in and trying to feed off your soul, off of fear. And what happens to people that actually invites them in? We don't hear about that. Why? Huh? Why?
Right.
I mean, what's up with that, right?
Yes.
We know enough from hearing about it, and it's not just the past 10 years. It goes back to the 1950s, 1940s. It goes way back. And you got the Men in Black, and you've got this, and then you've got aliens. You're like, whoa, how do we even make it to the grocery store at this point? You
know what, you guys, I wonder if you've heard of this. So I was listening to Clyde Lewis, and he was talking, this was on a very recent episode. It was a really long episode. Well, he goes like 5 hours, so most of his episodes are much longer than mine. So I'm still working on this one, but I've been engrossed in this episode for the last few days because I have to take it in pieces. I have to with my work and everything. And it's the idea of these, the phantom social workers. And they show up in these Volga limousines, and they would come in. It was during the 70s and 80s, I think, during the Satanic Panic, 80s, 90s, whatever. And they would show up at houses and they would go, we have to inspect your children. We have to see if are you abusing your children or what's going on here? And sometimes they would either just inspect the children and leave, or they would actually take the children. And yeah, so, and this is like a whole, new thing to me, and I'm like, how have I never heard of this phantom social worker thing? And to where the fact that these parents would then, these social workers would leave, and the parents would, of course, call the social work office, and they're like, why are these people coming and inspecting my children? What's going on? And they would go, we have no one in the area, and it would usually be a woman and two men, right? And they would be in this black garb. So I was wondering if you guys had ever heard of anything like that.
Yeah, I first became aware of it from Lauren Coleman's, I think I'm trying to remember which book of his that it was. The same one where he first wrote about the Mysterious America, wrote about the killer clowns and some of those other phenomena, probably late 70s, early 80s in that area. And yes, it was usually, I think one man and maybe two women or more, and they would just show up, and there was supposedly allegations that the child had been abused either at home or at school and fed into the whole, like I said, the satanic panic thing. And then when they tried to trace back the agency that the people claimed to be from, either had never heard of the people, they didn't work there, or no such agency existed. Their license plates and things that tracked back, total dead end. And it wasn't just here in the U.S., it was very prevalent in the United Kingdom as well at the same time. And then just as strangely as it started happening, just as mysteriously, then it stopped. So it's
and they never actually identified any of them, right?
Yeah,
not one single case could be tracked back and go, okay, well, actually, that could have been so and so. Like there was not one case.
They finally just decided, well, it's an urban legend; they don't really exist. But try telling that to somebody who had people show up at their door
at their house.
Kids.
Yeah.
That's insane. But if you think about it, that would work. But I mean, it seems to me that would be just, like you said, satanic panic or, unfortunately the white slavery is a lot worse than people think it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible.
If you look at the number of missing kids.
Oh, geez.
In just the U.S. alone, where do those kids go? Not just kids, missing people. I mean, you're getting over into the David Paulides stuff now, and that whole. Again, he has like the people. Steph Young's written some really good books about people that go into a bar and they never come out. Especially in the UK, they've got more cameras in the UK than they do in Las Vegas, I think, and. Where do they go? They go into a bar. They're not seen leaving, and then maybe they're found 2 months later in the water. They've obviously been alive up until just recently.
Before, yes.
What happened to them? Yeah, it's just
that. My own son. That happened to my son. That happened to my son. And he's picked up. He's picked up. I think I told it to Shannon last time that where he just he went in the bathroom. He comes out and he's in a different place. He doesn't have a clue
Did we cover that last time? Please tell me we did, because I would have been all over that. Yeah,
we did. And then he got to. Do you remember me telling you also that my other son, who's his older brother, had a feeling? He's like, I can't get a hold of him. I don't. Oh
my God, that's right.
I don't know what caused him to do this, but he has much more ability than I do. He's just not. He's just doesn't use it as much. But he listened this night, and he got in the car, and he says, I'm driving out there. What he thought he was going to do, I don't have a clue. But he's like, his brother was like 2 hours away at Atlantic City. I'm just going to go to Atlantic City and start looking for him. I don't know what he was thinking, and he doesn't want to talk about it. He just basically said, I couldn't get a hold of him. I had a bad feeling. I got in the car, and I just drove. He missed his exit, excuse me, that's wrong. He didn't miss his exit. He just took a wrong exit. He went to turn around. Normally, when you get off the exit at, like the New Jersey Turnpike, you wind up at a gas station. Mm-hmm. He goes to turn around in this gas station, and he sees some guy leaning against the wall of the back side of the gas station. And he says, oh, my God, that's my brother. And he pulls up and puts him in the car and drives him home. Mm. Now, what made him take the wrong exit or the right one? How did he get there? He has no clue how he got there. He was wearing a shirt that didn't belong to him. His shoelaces were missing. And he has no clue what happened from the time he left the bathroom. He walked out into that where they were, and it was all different, and everybody was gone. Mm. And he has no clue what happened between. Now, was that something where somebody, he's in his drink or something and was trying to kidnap him? I mean, or was it an alien thing? Was it what? We don't know. We don't have a clue. So, these things happen all the time. And like Steve said, when you get those pictures of the bar and you see the cameras and the cameras just stop, and, the man is waiting outside of the restroom for the girlfriend, and the next thing you know, the guy's gone and nobody knows where he is, and he winds up in the water. How many times has that? We know the times maybe that it's happened, but how many times did it almost happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how many cameras do they avert? How does that even happen?
I don't know. And they say, like, when the Black Eyed Kids show up or anything like that, that a lot of these cameras will go wacky and stop working. And then hear a loud bang. That, to me, I clicked on that loud bang thing and I'm thinking, man, that's them coming through. You know, that's interdimensional. It just, to me, I mean, like I said, I'm nobody. But just when I heard that, I was just like, okay, that's there's something up there. And I'll tell you something. Every time Steve tells his story, when we're on a show or we're talking on the phone or something, and he tells his story, the next day or an hour later, there's a knock on my door, and the first thing I go is, "Damn it, Steve!"
Yeah, the first time I ever talked about my Black Eyed Kids experience was on Heather Wade's Midnight in the Desert show, Art Bell's show, and it was about, I guess, 4:00 in the morning or something. There was like a female scream right outside my bedroom window. Oh. And I ran into my daughter's room. I thought it was her, and she had heard it too and hopped up out of bed. And she's like, "Damn it, Dad, that's what you get for talking about those black-eyed kids." And it was, I had put off talking about that for so long just because, like the thing in the ditch that was stirring up the leaves, that's the two things out of pretty much everything that's ever happened to me that has scared me the most. And the black-eyed kids, I mean, there was just no reason to be as scared as I got, but I had waves and waves of fear. Just that fight or flight thing, you know.
Okay.
Totally inexplicable.
Can I just bring this up? Because I wasn't planning to mention this, but you guys were mentioning like a knock and a bang. And the actual episode that Clyde Lewis has this titled was called "The Devil Knocks Thrice." And the main focus was that he actually had an experience where he had 3 knocks and he got up and there was no one there. And then he found out a short time later that a very good friend of his show and someone that he personally knew had passed away, and he had actually captured an EVP while he was on some Facebook Live of this Terry person. And he mentioned her, and then you could hear this laugh in the background. And, you know, EVPs are very controversial and whatever you want to make of them. But that was in the same episode as this phantom social worker situation. So it's interesting that you guys bring up the bang and the noises, because that's actually what that episode is titled, is "The Devil Knocks Thrice."
I've heard the knocks before. I've had that happen in places that were haunted, and then I've had it happen in places that I didn't think was haunted, you know, so.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just creepy, though. You think about it, and all of a sudden somebody knock on your door, and you open it and nobody's there.
Right.
Last time I heard it, I knocked back, but didn't get any response.
They're like, "Steve, that's not how this works. Stop it right now."
I've gotten used to it with Steve, and I'll tell you, it's just as creepy every time. You can get used to this stuff, but you still get creeped out fast.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm by no means a brave soul.
Have you ever heard of exploding head syndrome?
Oh. No, I hope I don't get that right now. It would be a mess in here.
It happens to a lot of people. I think the majority of people have had it happen to them. Just as you're starting to drift off to sleep, you will hear like a really loud bang or an explosion, like people thought their water heater blew up or something blew up outside, to find that there's absolutely nothing out of place or amiss or whatever, but that's the somewhat facetious term for it, is exploding head syndrome.
Wow.
Okay.
I was going to say, is that a Hollywood term or what is that?
But I've had that happen before. Be just about asleep and hear a loud bang or
wow.
Time it sounded like the sliding glass door fell out of the track and shattered, and couldn't find a thing.
Wow. The things that have happened to Steve, I mean, you've had him on, I don't know how many times. But I'm telling you, haven't even scratched the surface. When you start talking to him,
he is the most oft guest so far.
He has talked to gangsters via Ouija board before with models in a closet, which is interesting.
Bummer, Steve.
I talk about that in my book.
He's like, there's other things that I won't mention in the book, but yeah, that's for me.
He's videotaped. He was a photographer, and he was doing this fast photography where he was taking pictures of this one model as she's actually getting scratched on the leg by the famous
that
three
one.
scratches.
That's
Do you remember
amazing.
that?
Talk about
Steve,
that.
you talked about that in Haunted Las Vegas
one
episode,
frame,
right?
nothing. The next frame,
Yes.
she's got 3 scratches down the back of her leg.
Always in
And
threes.
she's like, that's demonic. That's, mocking the Trinity or whatever. She left and never came back.
Yeah, she's like, peace out. Yeah. That was mentioned in the Haunted Las Vegas episode. I think
I did talk about that. That was a house I lived in out there.
Yes, sir. Yes.
There's so many things, and that's that's why he writes the books, and that's why he talked me into doing this, because I said, if I can help one person, if one person can look at us and go, you know what, that's the way the mist showed up, and then I heard the crackling, and then I saw the sparkling, and then all of a sudden it started to manifest. I mean, that's something where somebody can click in, where you're not just having somebody, on a television show go, did you hear that? Something touched me.
Right.
When you hear it or feel it yourself, it's totally different.
And you don't know if it's a producer or something that set them up. They might not know. They might be completely legitimate and think, but the producer needs a little more jazz. So we just don't know. We've said it many a time.
So you experience it and you're alone and that, there's not anybody trying to get a reaction out of you.
Yeah.
I've got one for you. Earlier, you're talking about the veil being thin, and it's funny because I've had that phrase in my head recently, just before we got on here. What do you think about people that claim that loved ones have come back to them before their demise or before a tragedy? Do you think that can happen? Do you have experience of that? Or
Yes, I have.
Okay. So I have an interesting one that happened around this time of year, 2002. I'd moved back in with my parents after a divorce, my daughter and I, and my daughter was at school. My dad and I had gone out. I would take him and drive him around to do his banking and shopping, whatever. My mom was there in the house by herself. It was probably early afternoon, around 2 o'clock. Well, she's in the bathroom. She's doing something in front of the mirror, washing her face. Well, she looks up, standing in the doorway is her mother, my grandmother, the Gypsy Witch, is standing there in the doorway wearing the pink dress that she was buried in. And my mom said to her, just, she didn't know what to do or say, but she was just like, Mama. And so that she could see that there was another person would have been on my grandmother's left, but she could only see the hem of their skirt. And so it lasted for a few seconds, and then it was like they just started moving backwards down the hall. And she stepped out into the hallway. There's nobody there. Her bedroom door was shut. My bedroom was at the other end of the hall. Nothing down there. She was the only one at home. She was wide awake. And it was that was October 22nd in 2002. My mom passed away 1 year to the day, October 22nd, 2003.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
And I've always felt
almost like they were coming back to get them.
She said that was some kind of warning. They were big believers in warnings and omens and portents and all this. And my dad and I tried to, it was probably just her way of, coming back to see that you were doing okay or to let you know everything's going to be all right, because my mom had just beat cancer. And my mom was just convinced that no, it was more than that. Sure enough, a year to the day later, she passed away about the same time of day. Wow. I was in the room with her when she passed.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's kind of creepy.
It was even down to almost the hour.
When I lived in that house, after that, I would be scared to look down that hallway. If I see my grandmother, I'm going to lose it.
You're like, I'm out. I'm never coming back.
I've got a year.
Here's one too, Steve, that you and I have talked about as well, where people that aren't even past yet, but they're very close to death. They're in their death state. They're in a coma, like they're beginning, it might be months till they pass. But I've had experiences that way too. When I saw my mother, and she spoke to me telepathically before she died, which I still didn't understand for years.
I've heard of that happening, where maybe somebody would be in a coma, and then all of a sudden there would be like maybe one other person in the room with them. Suddenly that person is very lucid, and they'll say something like, I have to go soon, That kind of happened with my mom. The day that she passed, earlier in the day, she wasn't in a coma, but she was just very, very quiet. And suddenly she sat up in the bed and she kind of looks around. She was in the hospital, and she said, "Not right now, children. I can't go right now, but I'll see you later." And then she just laid back down. She wasn't talking to anybody that I could see. Right. And then that afternoon, she passed away about 3:00.
But they were there. They did, there's so many that, people used to say all the time. In fact, they'll be out in the hall ringing their hands saying, but he's talking to people that aren't there. And I just want to walk up to and go, but sweetie, they are,
Yeah.
They are there, That's so many.
I've heard of people that could hear like angelic choir and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I also heard the story of a man who was yelling that his feet were burning up.
Oh.
And that they uncovered his feet and stuff, and he still yelled, my feet are on fire. And he was like, he thought that the flames of hell were licking up onto his feet.
Yep. Can you imagine?
That wouldn't be a good situation.
That wouldn't be a good way to go.
That reminds me of one of my favorite movies, Scrooged, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's having that dream of being in the coffin, and he's like, well, I'm about to go to hell because I've been a really bad person in life.
Yeah. But you see, it's those thoughts right there that actually keep people from crossing.
Right.
Right. Or it's something like I had a really good friend, and her and her husband, they like to do basically what we do. And she just basically wanted to go to a place where had been a plane crash. Now, Steve and I have talked about this multiple times. When you have a plane crash or a train or something where multiple people at the same time go, there's so many different things, but that's a perfect example. Like some of them probably pass right away. And I've heard many a time before something like that, your soul it knows and it's gone. You say it's and it knows, but how much does the soul really have control? We don't know. So you hear those things like it just leaves right then. Okay, so if it leaves right then, where does it go? What does it do? Do some people, because of the way they are, their own beliefs, are they at peace with their own belief? Whether it be, like I said, Hindu, Chinese, Western, Native American, whatever their beliefs are. The other side is as personal to that person as it is to you and I. So you're going to see or you're going to feel or you're going to do whatever it is. But I believe there's a light, a divine light, a connection, a silver cord, whatever you want to call it, that brings us back to our ourselves or whatever you want to call that. So for some reason, some people, it happens so quickly or they're stunned or whatever because of their beliefs or what they're going through that they decide to stay. Like, no, I'm not doing that. I can't leave. I have to see my kids or I have to finish this business meeting or I have to do whatever. And it could be something that simple. So here she is with her husband and they're doing video recording and I believe EVP and I believe she had dowsing rods to try to help communicate. And she's speaking to people on this field and she's asking, is anybody here who needs help? Basically the same thing I explained earlier that I do. And she's very kind, very loving, her intent is very pure, very wonderful person. And she's got right away 5 different people, 3 of whom have no idea they're dead, 2 who know they're dead and just don't want to cross because they're scared. They're here. Basically, they know what this is, even though they're walking around in this cornfield. This plane crash, I believe, was in the 70s. And I honestly can't remember the flight number and all that, but it was in the papers. People would know. And she's speaking to these 2 sheep. They had to go back every other day or every day, whatever it was 3 or 4 times a week. They went back for 2 weeks to try to talk to these individuals, to get the ones who didn't know they were dead to understand that they were dead, that they were past and they should cross over and connect into that whole love energy of, seeing their loved ones on the other side or whatever it is, to try to change their demeanor and their feeling and their energy so they could see the light again and then cross into it, which made sense to me because I've done that. And then the other 2 who knew they were dead that were just convinced that if they crossed into that light, that they were going to be punished. And she had to tell them, read my intent, read my heart. I'm telling you that that's not true. And if you need help, let me call on your loved ones that have crossed and have them bring you and carry you over. And that's basically what we had to do with Steve's motorcycle guy. I call him Cool Breeze. But to have his loved ones come and cross them over, because he would believe them. You know, when you've got somebody that's stubborn, I call their mother, because if their mother's passed, if their mom is passed, I can't tell you how many times that's happened, but works. You know, because they can say, look, they're telling you the truth. You just come with me, you know, and that helps an awful lot too. It sounds funny, but you know, if you can get that to happen, right. You know, it's a beautiful thing, man. It really is, you know, and I would hope somebody would do it for me, you know, but you think about that. What a powerful thing this thing we call the soul, you know. Scientists have said that they've weighed it out. What is it, Steve, that you lose, like, what is it, 21 ounces or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. It's a measurable weight, that
you know, we've had people see a person pass and actually feel that lift. You know, I've experienced that and stuff.
I have. When my grandmother passed, that was the first person I was ever with when they died. I felt her pass. And so all her kids were gathered in the room there. It's like she was holding on to one of my uncles got there. He had to come in from Michigan. And when he got there, it had been more than a half hour or so. She was gone, but it was strange. The whole room felt like a vacuum. There was like absolute silence, and then it was like a pressure, and then the pressure was just gone, and she was gone, and it was just, it's indescribable, really.
Yep, it is. It is. And, you know, like I said, it's such a simplistic, the most simplistic, complicated thing that I've ever tried to wrap my mind around. And here we are, maybe 47 years in. Like I said, I've got more questions now than I had when I first started.
And I think that's the fun of it because if you had all the answers, then it would be like, okay, now what? Take a needlepoint or something, you know, it's like, there's always something new to discover.
Absolutely. And that's the mystery of it all. And I think that's why we're all so drawn to it. But, you know, who also doesn't like to have that scare? Who doesn't like to, you know, I was just sitting, we were watching, Stranger Things on the Netflix.
Amen.
I was watching with my son. We're watching an episode a night, so it's kind of something cool to look forward to. And we're laying on the bed, and there's a flag outside of the wall where we are, and the winds were kicking up, and that flag was kicking against the wall, banging and making all these noises. And I'm like, woo, it's almost Halloween, and that's so cool. You know, who doesn't like a good scare, something so simplistic? We can turn into that. And there really are, you know, some things that we should, you know, maybe not so much be afraid of, but we should actually put up our, you know.
Yeah, well, I think that fear response, that's the most primal of all our senses and urges, is fear.
Absolutely. But,
and there's something fun about feeling that surge, you know, that adrenaline you get when something scares the crap out of you.
Absolutely. And who doesn't like that? Who doesn't like a good ghost story or bumps in the night? But I'll tell you what, there are times when, you know, if I leave, you know, get up to go down the hallway in the middle of the night, I'll run down the rest of it. You know? It starts to get you to that point where, like, and what are we going to do? You know, or the magic of the covers pulling up over your head, but we have all these little things that we do that we feel that protects us more, you know.
Yeah, I won't go into a room unless I've already stuck my hand in and turned the light on.
Right. And Steve and I both, if we go to a hotel room, we'll sage it first.
You don't know what's been in there.
Oh, yeah.
See, but you guys can feel what has been in there first. And a lot of us cannot. We don't, you know, Sysco, your story of the ride from an angel, I saw that whole scene playing out like a movie. You know, you're sticking your hands out and you're trying to feel the energy from the car before you get in it. Yep. A lot of us don't have that ability.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
Well, we don't have it developed, I guess I should say.
We do. I mean, if you
a lot of people have it and don't realize it.
Yeah. And I'm trying, honestly, at that point in time, like I said, I was trying everything in my woman's mind, brain,
Right.
everything that I've tried to train people, don't do this or don't,
Yeah.
I'm going against all that.
Right.
And I'm getting in the car. I'm getting in the car.
You're like,
I'm getting
wait,
in the car.
what?
What is wrong with you?
What's happening?
This is what's going on in my head. I'm like, okay, well, if he moves, I could, and we tell ourselves these things, and it's crazy. I almost did like a reverse, like a 180 on that.
Right.
Because there's been times where elevators have opened and I've looked at the person and I didn't know whether it was coming from the person, the elevator, the energy that was in the elevator before this, but I didn't get on it. I'll take the next one. I'll take the stairs. I don't care. I've done that, and I try to teach people that, because the first thing you say, honestly, if you're really honest with yourself, is, I don't want to hurt that person's feelings, because they're going to think I'm not getting on the elevator because I don't like
I've had that happen, getting on a train and just, something doesn't feel right. And sometimes you can't always pick where it's coming from. And then other time it's abundantly clear. It's like, that guy over there is putting off the weirdest vibe I've ever felt. I'm going to hop off and wait for the next train. I've done that before.
Yep. I'll tell you what, I have that a lot, being the fact that I've worked in a lot of retail and in customer service and bartending and you name it, I've done it. To feed my kids, I've done a lot of retail and stuff. But I'll tell you, you're in a crowd of people. I cannot do a mall. I don't like a mall. I'm one of those females that I could care less about shopping. If I can buy it on the internet,
I don't care for the crowds like that.
I can't do a Walmart.
Nursing home, anything like that. There's just too much stuff that I'm bombarded with.
It's too much. It takes too much energy and it takes too much recovery after the fact. It's not worth it. I just don't do it. If I'm prepared
for it and got the right stuff with me, I could do it and be okay for a little while, maybe an hour. But it's like, and this, like being an empath, when you walk into a place like that, everybody in there is trying to pull energy from you.
Yes.
Whether they realize it or not, they sense it. It's the moth to the flame.
Yep. And then there's the ones, and I still don't know what these are, and I'm going to tell everybody who's listening right now, if you've ever had this happen, I call them Grinners. And a grinner is one of the scariest things I've ever come up against, and I've seen some things. It's like Alice in Wonderland. I've seen some things. I have seen some things. A grinner is scary because they know that you know. And I can't really put that into words what that feels like. Okay, here's one. I'm with my niece and we're going into a place and we're doing these little shops down in a little village, in a little downtown. And we're just minding our own business and whisking in and out stores. Oh, let's go look at this one. This must be, we were just doing that. And I said, let's go in here. They've got some crystals and they've got some other stuff and they've got some bulk herbs and things like that. I need some chamomile tea. Let's do this. So I grab a hold of the door and I open it and I stop. And she knows me. So when I say get behind me, she doesn't ask questions. She gets behind me, And I said, I'm going in first. There's something up. And she just said, okay. She said, yes, ma'am. So we go walking in and I take about 3 or 4 steps in. And it's a lovely shop, beautiful stuff, maybe 5 or 6 people in this shop. And I look around and I feel it and I'm looking for it. I'm trying to locate it because I don't know where it's coming from. So this pull, you feel it. Right away, I wear certain rings and things that do protection. I put it over my, the center of my chest where your chakra and your chi, all that right there in your center. And I cover that because you feel that pull there. And all right, there's an energy vampire in here and it's not good. This one knows what it's doing. It's not just somebody who's sitting in a room and drains you and has no idea. This one knows it's doing it and it's going after it and it's not good. So I stop what I'm doing and I'm looking. And right at the end of the shop, all of a sudden this woman's head picks up real slow, turns real quick towards me, and just grins. And there's a slow hissing coming out of her mouth.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, I found it. We're gone. And I don't even turn around. We just start backing out of the shop. And I'm putting down all this stuff. That's a grinner. Now, the reason I call them grinners is because when they see you and they know telepathically.
They know that then that grin comes out.
They know.
And I don't think it's them grinning. It's whatever entity is controlling them
Exactly.
Grinning, put that grin on there.
No hiding that.
I've had that. I mean, like somebody you staring at the back of them, and suddenly they turn around, 180 degrees or more, lock eyes with you, and then that grin just starts. Such as I can't even describe. It's so slow the way it spreads across their face, and they always look like they've got too many teeth. They look like a pariah.
Oh God!
Yes.
You guys run into the freakiest people. Are they people? We don't know. Oh my goodness.
Maybe used to be, maybe no more. I don't know. But the Grinners are I don't like. The scariest grinner I ever saw was probably a 3 to 4 year old child.
Oh God.
And the way that kid, the energy that was coming off of this, I couldn't find it. You keep and I was stuck where I was because I was behind a counter and I'm trying to find it. And all of a sudden I'm locating it and I thought it was the mother. And then I looked. And this kid just and it's just the same as Steve explained. They just turn their head and they look at you and they lock eyes with you and they grin.
Oh, hell no.
And you just feel it. You're like, I gotta get out of here.
It turns your blood to ice. It's like,
yes,
get out of here.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So that's pretty darn creepy.
Yeah.
Different things out there. So, you can't even go to your refrigerator anymore. I mean, there's you can't leave the house.
No, not after Ghostbusters. Come on.
I had an experience like that one time. The kid wasn't a grinner, but he had eyes like a cat. The pupils were like slits up and down. Just a little bitty kid, like maybe 4 or 5 years old, but I kept feeling this weird vibe. Like you, I'm looking around, and then I look down, and this little kid's standing there, and he's got literally cat eyes. And I just left. I was in a market and I just put my basket down and left. I'm like, I don't want any part of whatever's going on here.
Is that an invitation for people like you that are empaths to invoke it or to release it, or what is it? Challenge.
It was almost like, I know what you've got. Come and see what I've got. Come on, let's dance.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like a challenge.
But what does that mean, though? I mean, does that mean that you need to start speaking to it and, in a certain, what does that mean?
That's a great question, Shannon, because I've never met a grinner I wanted to help.
Or that I wanted to
No, I like that answer. That's what I was looking for. I'm like, what does that mean, though?
That's a good question. I never thought about it like that, but it's not something like it doesn't need anything that, whatever it wants from me, I don't want to give it.
Right.
And I'm not.
You're like, I'm out. You're like, I just find that interesting because both of you are like, I'm out. I'm going. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going.
It serves to let you know that, okay, maybe I'm not as powerful as I think I am sometimes.
Nope. Right. Not doing it.
Like
not having.
Keeps you in check. Like,
I love it.
Yeah, no, I'll leave this for somebody else.
It's like if you think about it, like we were talking earlier about, and I know I'm going to get a knock on my door now. Steve, dadgummit.
Don't say it.
Because, it's, it just happens. One time I did it with Jehovah's Witnesses. I was like, the poor people, I felt bad for them.
Oh, okay.
I took their it was great. Everything worked out okay. I just like, you got to go now. You don't understand. Don't talk about it. But it was just, it was the knock. It either gets you all flustered up or you just like, okay, so what am I dealing with here? They like you. I'm going to be happy. So I just start dancing around and singing some happy song and everything goes away. So is it really that simple? Or is it not? You know what I mean? If you can raise your vibrational, whatever you want to call it, if you can be happy and full of joy and just singing the silly song or goofing off, they can't seem to be around it. They don't like it. It spells them. So, the fear is what they want and the opposite. And it's hard to do,
They feed off that fear.
Yeah.
But you're right. Laughter, light, joy, anything like that will drive it away. But sometimes it's hard to conjure that up by yourself in that situation.
I know of this is going to sound so ridiculous, but compared to everything else we've spoken to tonight, why not? I actually know of a gentleman who was, I want to say probably medium psychic, somewhere in there. Okay. They're two different things. He's a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. And he had a friend who had a haunted house and they were always having problems. And it turned out that it was an entity that was human that was negative. Okay. So it's just an angry human ghost. And it was causing a lot of problems. They tried a lot of things and they couldn't get it to go and they couldn't get it to calm down. They sat and read jokes out of joke books to each other. All night long for 3 nights until the thing couldn't take it anymore and left. Now, how crazy does that sound?
And at the end of the day, sometimes annoyance, it wins out.
Yeah. Laughter.
And positivity, right?
Yeah. Positive, light, and laughter. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. Would it work all the time? Who knows? You know what I mean? Who knows? Because that's kind of hard to do.
And how many times would, you both mentioned these grinners that you've come across. How many times do they grin? A day or a week or a month? How many times do they come across someone like you guys, right?
I've lost count at one because I'm not sticking around.
Well, I've seen quite a few. And it's pretty crazy because when you're walking down a crowded, like if you're walking down New York, you just imagine, bustling street, you've got all these people going back and forth. I mean, there's a mixture of all kinds. And, people say, vampires don't exist or these things don't exist or, entities, people that are possessed, taking over a person. But are you kidding me?
Like, don't push your luck.
When you go into a place, I've got another medium friend who says that some of these places they go into, like you go into, I don't really want to give any names, but like if you go into a power broker place or a place where like Hollywood, like Steve, you would know about this, Las Vegas, you go into places like this. If you can stand back, if you have the ability to stand back, and I don't, sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't, but the darkness that just lingers around the bottom, the legs of some of these people, and it's almost like these entities are just hugged on to these people and just, it's greed, it's, destruction.
I've experienced that, especially in Vegas. I met a lot of celebrities, a lot of really famous people in the line of work that I was in when I was doing the photography. And just, you can feel it when they walk in the room. I mean, they have that, whether you want to call it charisma or whatever, there's something that will draw you to that person. And just an average person, they're even more so drawn. When you kind of know what it is, there's not so much of a draw there, but it's something different. I mean, the room literally changes when certain people come in. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything, but their very presence will make a room dark or light or what have you.
But I have a question because you talk about famous people, right? Is that you hear, and I mean to sound so cliche, but you hear it a lot, is that because they've made some kind of a deal with a quote-unquote devil or,
it makes you wonder.
Yeah. I mean, you hear about ties with that.
Yes. You can sit there and you can, how do I put this? Maybe not consciously, if you know what I mean, not as clear consciously as actually walking up into a room and signing a contract in blood.
Right.
But when you start walking over people, when you start taking your free will and choose to crush that person or do these deeds and just to make yourself more famous or more higher up in the ranks, so to speak. It can be anybody. Don't you really start changing your character and start lowering your vibrational frequency? Right. If you think about it.
I would think so. Yeah.
When you start bringing in greed and you start bringing in, if it's all me, give me mine and nobody else counts and I don't care who I hurt on the way up, you start doing that. And isn't that the same? As
kind of the same thing. And then the Satanists have a thing where they can identify each other by the evil that surrounds them. Evil begets evil.
Really?
Yes.
They can identify each other by that.
They can just for the evil presence that's around them. That's probably something demonic or whatever, but heard that talked about how, one can find another just because of the way the vibrations feel around them when that person is nearby.
Even if they've never met before.
Yeah.
Because you start to be able to feel it. I mean, if you think about it, there's, empaths, like take me and Steve, like, I mean, I don't even know how I would categorize myself because every time I think I understand it, something else pops up. Yeah. But there's empaths who have, um, there's multi-levels. So like you can walk in, like Steve and I can walk into a restaurant. I know we have this in common. I can walk by, say, a diner, and I can walk by every person and I can tell you.
Yep, absolutely. I know who's cheating on who. I know who's about to get a divorce. I know who's having money problems.
Yep.
That's just, you're bombarded. You have to switch that off or you'll go crazy.
Yep. This is why I don't like to go to malls and stuff like that. But equally as strong for me is I can't go into a pet shop or a zoo or something like that because it's much stronger for me with the animals because of them being afraid or them being scared or being hurt. Is like I would stop 6 lanes of traffic for a turtle crossing the road.
Yeah.
I can't deal with it. I can't watch those videos on Facebook. Somebody stuck in I can't do it. I'll lose my mind. So there's different levels of that. Now, if we chose just out of, life choices and our hearts or whatever to use that for good, why couldn't that also be used for evil?
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
So if you think about that, if I could walk in, like I was bartending actually at the same bar with the shot of tequila and no salt. And, a friend of mine came in and she just wanted to visit me and she was just real lonely and she just wanted to sit and talk to somebody. And, she was real careful about it too, because she had a ride, she was going to go home with me. I was there. She wasn't going to be alone. It's kind of terrible. We have to go through these days just to, have an evening, and talk to some people. You have all these backup safety nets set up. She had a ride home and she was going to be safe. She wasn't going to leave with anybody. She just wanted to talk to some people and she sat at the bar, a woman alone at the bar. Here comes this guy. I come around the corner and he came into the bar on the side. There was 2 entrances alongside of this bar. He comes walking through, nice looking guy. And she looks at me, how we are, we'll say, she goes, oh man, look at him. He looks good. Look at his arms, and he went walking past where I was and then almost got to where she was. And as he walked by, I said, no, honey, not him. He beats his women. And she just looked at me and she said, oh, please. And I said, no, and she knew me enough to know I wasn't joking. I said, yeah, he's not what he looks like. He gets drunk and that's it. You get to know that. So why couldn't somebody else that chose to use this and develop it for bad? It's the same way, to look at her, same situation, look at her and go, she's vulnerable. She's lonely. I can go take advantage of her. And depending on how, people would use it.
It works both ways.
You bet it. So the only thing that we can do is, we can, just try to keep the good going, because I'll tell you the way the world's going right now, it seems to be it's getting kind of gray. It's getting kind of gray. But like I said earlier, you keep your light going because one pinpoint of light will, brighten up a darkened room quick. Well, I tell people that all the time.
I think that's probably a good place to probably try to close her down here. I think we could probably easily go for another 3 hours, but for data purposes on Libsyn, I probably better close her down pretty soon. So, please let everybody know where they can find you guys. And, another thing before you start that, the second the book comes out, if you guys, or one or both of you guys want to hop on just for a real quick blurb about, hey, the book's out and, let's get this thing kind of pumped up a little bit. But, let everybody know where they can find you guys.
Well,
I'm on social media, mainly on Facebook. I'm friends with anybody on there, so you can touch me on there. My email address is in all my books. I also have a Twitter it's strange, odd. I don't do much with that. So Facebook is the easiest way to get in touch with me in a hurry. I'm on Messenger as well. My books are on Amazon. Strange Things in the Wood, More Strange Things in the Wood, being the 2 collections of stories, and I have a book of my own stories too that's on there. And other than that, that's the best way to find me.
And you can find me. I am a wire sculptor artist, and I have also decided to let my bohemian fly, and I have started my new business. That's the Bohemian Feather. And I do upcycled vintage doily dream catchers as well as traditional hand-woven dream catchers. And some of them are teeny tiny, and some of them are as big as a doorway.
She does amazing work, let me tell you.
Yes.
I do that, and I do wickedly wired wearable art as well. I run both of those. I've just been featured in Fashion Haunts magazine, was available throughout Philadelphia, New York, and New Jersey. They did a lot of my jewelry and dream catchers for some fashion shoots that are very interesting and very cool, and a lot of that's on my Facebook, Sysco Murdoch, and on the Bohemian Feather. So you can there. And the new book will be out soon. We're typing our little hands off here. It will be out soon, and it's called We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided journey to a haunted life, and it's spirits, ghosts, and other darker shades of wrath.
Mm-hmm.
So you will enjoy that, and you can take a journey with Steve and I through that, and we'd love to hear from people who have got some other ideas of things that happen in the book.
Absolutely. And in addition, I've got more books that I'm working on, and I've got a YouTube project coming up pretty soon that I think everybody will like.
Uh-oh, YouTube project, Steve on film. Yes.
Yes.
It's about time.
Yes, and